committee members and staff that the committee meeting will be recorded and broadcast throughout Parliament Buildings. Not Parliament Buildings, it's going to be broadcast online. Just advising everybody in the public gallery, everybody's welcome to use mobile devices as long as they are in airplane mode. All devices should be muted. You can connect to the Wi-Fi, it's just the guest Wi-Fi. There's no password required. So with no apologies, I know we have a number of members coming late from the policing board, but they should be here. Or unless anybody's aware of any apologies? None? Okay. Chair's business, there's none today. So draft minutes, can I refer everybody to the draft minutes of the meeting held on both 27th and 29th of January? They're pages 6 and 9 of the main pack. Everybody content? Okay, thank you. Matters arising? None. So just moving very quickly on then to item number 5, which is a presentation from the Shankill Shared Women's Centre. Can I refer everybody to the papers at tab 18? Welcome Dr. Betty Carlisle, who's the Chief Executive of the Shankill Women's Centre, who's made us very welcome here today. So Betty, I'm going to hand over to yourself just to make some opening remarks, and then I think you're going to show us a video.
Okay, well, just to say, I am absolutely delighted that you are here today, and I think that this is maybe something a bit groundbreaking, and if we could have other committees here, we would love it. It just feels as if you're more into the community and into the heart of the community. I was delighted to be able to take some people around the work we do, as well as a tour of this wonderful building of ours. So what I would like to do would show you a video, and the video is the making of this building. So it starts from this was derelict ground at the very beginning, and us working and how we included the community the whole way along in the design and the building of. But the video says it all, so probably the best thing to do would be turn the video on and have a wee look.
Thank you.
We're in the Shankill Women's Centre today. We're going to be looking at the materials for our new build, which hopefully is going to be up in a couple of years' time up in Lanark Way in the Shankill. We're going to be looking at materials like brick and the window frames and the outside area. And we're also going to be looking at branding, the way we brand the new centre and the new logo.
Today we've got together with our architect from Todd's Architects and with the two ladies from the branding company. Today we were looking at colour schemes, designs, different sort of logos and things up for debate, because obviously we were very interested in keeping our history and our nod to the hummingbird, because we've had a hummingbird building before, we've had a hummingbird logo. And it's very important to us that the hummingbird represents the women that we support, because the hummingbird is told it can't fly, and we tell women you can fly, and we're going to help you to fly.
So we've been working with the Shankill Women's Centre since 2015, and in the last year we're trying to bring their scheme to life. And a part of that process is showing the women what they're getting in the centre itself, but also showing them how the building will look when it's done.
The board are meeting tonight to look at the final plans for the new build, which has been ongoing from 2015. And the reason for the new build is for shared space. We don't have the room to expand anymore. We don't have the room for the classes or the childcare. We'd have to break out into 2 different buildings for our childcare. So we need this building so badly. That's why it's on board at the minute, and that's why we need it, because we don't have the space.
We're looking to have more activities, so once there's that space that we can use, we're hoping to utilise it and put more programmes on for the women and create them relationships, deepen them even further and get more people involved.
The plans look absolutely fabulous. It's a brilliant building. We've looked at all the different types of structures that are going into it, the materials that get into it, and it's all very modern.
Shankill Women's Centre is a gem in Belfast. It's so well known, by all cultures and communities, and it provides such fabulous services, particularly in the areas of training, family support, health and well-being, and protecting the most vulnerable. So to see Shankill Women's Centre finally having this home of their own, right beside an interface, so it's going to change the outlook in relation to that. It's part of the community, but it's also part of wider Belfast. So to see them having their purpose-built facilities all under one roof, a one-stop shop for services for women, families, and it doesn't matter where you come from, what community background or what culture, Shankill Women's Centre is going to be a great central place to come for all your support needs.
This building has been 10 years in the making before it's got to this. We can see it now, it's come together, and in 3 or 4 months' time there's going to be cladding, there's going to be brick, and it's going to look more like a building rather than just brick and mortar on the ground and muck on the ground.
I think obviously Protestant Catholics majority will be the main users of the centre, but I do think there will be other ethnicities, other races and stuff. Obviously it's clear in some religions some women don't get as much support as our country does, so it would just be probably nice for the centre to offer some support to those women who aren't getting support from maybe their own background.
I think when we talk about that, when we talk about good relations work, I mean, communities have been well ahead of the game. I mean, they've been doing this for many, many years. I mean, Betty and the women here at the Shankill Women's Centre have been working with different community organisations from across Belfast. And I think that giving assets like this over, you know, really investing in that kind of work shows that we take those kind of initiatives seriously. I think that's what it's all about. It is about empowering local women. It is about empowering local community development. And I think with the different aspects of the work that we'll see taking shape within the new Shankill Women's Centre here, it will be truly transformational. We're giving them a state-of-the-art building like this to allow them to be able to work and to continue to help this local community grow. I think that's what it's all about. It is the positive work that goes on in the city of Belfast right across different communities, and it is about bringing people together and allowing them to have that space to continue to create the city of Belfast that we all want to be proud of.
It has been a wee bit of a labour of love. So this project started way back in 2006 when we first took the plans on for the Shankill women themselves, and then obviously when the peace funding came in and it developed in the Shankill Shared Women's Centre, there was a lot of involvement and changes that we had to make to the plans. And I think one of the big things that we wanted to make sure was that the building's set within its context. So the way the building is laid out is that we have the reception as you come in with an exhibition space, so you get the first impressions of what the centre does. On the left hand side we've got the cafe where you can get a cup of tea or coffee, or you can actually have a full meal, and that extends into a large multifunctional hall which can be used for large events. And then on the other side of the ground floor we have the nursery, which does education from toddlers right up to after schools as well. Moving up through the building up to the first floor, it's really split into administration hub for the Shankill women to actually carry out their work. And then there's the adult education to the right hand side. So that has your art therapy rooms, your home economic rooms, your IT facilities and your training suites. So it does all sort of the skills that you need for your GCSE level and beyond. And then up at the very top of the tower we've got the youth empowerment facility, which is a large multifunctional hall that can be used for events, can be used for exercise. And the main thing that we've done is made sure that all the spaces are as flexible as possible, and that even the corridors work as hard as possible for chance meetings and interactions as well.
A lot of these women are coming in because they haven't been leaving the house. I mean, there's some women who wouldn't have come into a room, and where now they'll walk into a room completely filled with strangers and just be able to speak and have conversations.
I had lost my daughter, to an addiction. I'm not on my own out there that lost a child. There's a lot of parents out there, and we need to get that out to them and to say, come along here, go along to the new centre. It's bigger, you know, it's going to grow bigger, and there's a lot there for us.
I really can't wait till the new centre's opened and get involved more and helping out more. I think it'll be great, and if other people come on board, it'll help them too.
We are investing in the future. You know, Belfast is a fairly young city, and I think through these kind of projects where we're really, you know, empowering the local communities to actually look towards the future, to take sense of what the needs are, what is the needs within the local area, and it's through an asset like this that you're able then to start trying to address those needs, whether it's through tackling issues like isolation and loneliness, also giving people the space to be able to come in and actually plot out their own future, plot out their own pathway of where they want to go, and that's what this new centre is going to be able to do for this local area.
The making of this building from the very beginning has been an enormous journey, absolutely fascinating. I have actually learnt a lot, and the staff in the centre has learnt a lot as well, and but for them helping me out, getting on with their jobs while I was stuck in a room looking at maps and things like that. It's been fascinating, and it's just going to be like a phoenix rising out of a derelict site.
So just speaking to that, that's a wonderful thing that we have, that we love to show people. It was really hard work, and it's even amazing sometimes when I take people like yourselves around and I'm going, my goodness, this has really happened, you know. But just quickly, another thing I'd like to tell you is we got this money from Europe, peace monies, through SEUPB, and at the beginning of last year SEUPB sent me up a form to fill in, saying that they think would be good candidates. We put it in thinking nothing more of it, and July last year I got an email saying you're a finalist. I kind of went, finalist with what? So anyway, what happened was there's a big thing in Europe called Regio Stars, and 266 countries across Europe had put in for this Regio Stars, and we were finalists. There was 25 finalists and we were one of them, and it was broken into 5 categories, so we were in one of the categories against 4 other countries. So in October, Leslie Ann, who you met earlier, Leslie Ann and myself went over to Brussels and we did a presentation, and they told us we had to do a presentation in the style of Pica Chucha, which I'd never heard of, but anyway we got a training course and I looked it up, and the Pica Chucha style, Pica Chucha means chit-chat in Japanese, and the style is that you have 20 seconds per slide. You have 20 slides and you speak 20 seconds per slide. And I thought, how am I going to do this? Do you know of it?
No, but we're going to have
a lot of our presenters who know it.
I've said this, I think it should be implemented into government. And what I discovered through doing it, you have to tell the Pica Chucha presentation in the style of a story. So we did that, and that was okay. And what I learnt practicing was 20 seconds is no good. It's actually literally about 15 that you can speak for, because you have to breathe and you have to swallow. So anyway, we went over, did it, and we won. So the following night after the presentation, we had to go to a big place like the SSS or SSA Arena and receive our presentation, and we have a very small clip of a few minutes, and I just want to explain that all the way through it we were the last category, or the one before the penultimate one I think, but anyway, whenever people were getting up and the whole room was clapping really nicely, and when we won ours was screaming, and that was from about 6 ladies at the back of the room who works in the Brussels Commission, and Gina McIntyre, who flew over for the presentation. So I'd really like us to see that.
Category 5.
A Europe
closer to the citizens.
This category emphasizes projects aimed at fostering sustainable and integrated development across various territories and local initiatives. Let's check out our finalists. I would like to invite back on stage Director General Temis Christofidou, together with the juror, Professor Helena Leino from the Tampere University.
And the winners are Shankill Shared Women's Centre.
What an enthusiasm! It's time to share the jury's insights.
Yes, as in category 4, also in the category 5, the jury had to say, we need to say that it was a very difficult choice. As all the 5 finalists, those projects, they were excellent and they truly reflected the EU principles and the category 5 objectives, a Europe closer to citizens. In the end, we as the jury selected Shankill Shared Women's Centre in Belfast as the winner. This centre is the first of its kind in Northern Ireland, a dedicated shared space for women and their families from Protestant and Catholic communities across the region to meet and work together, also providing a wide variety of services such as childcare. This project truly illustrates the power of citizen initiatives. It shows that it is possible to bridge religious and cultural divides, even violent and long-standing ones. Something that we can wish for all of Europe and the world in such challenging times as these. So congratulations, Shankill Shared Women's Centre.
Now, ladies, Europe is watching you. Europe is watching very closely Belfast. So what message of feeling would you like to share with everyone who believes in building a better future?
I'm very overwhelmed by this. I didn't think this was going to happen. I think determination. We had a lot of obstacles along the way trying to do this, and I wasn't letting go. My staff team around me, all our partners weren't letting go of this. We were going to overcome those obstacles, especially the violence. We brought women together, and I just believe in the power of women and what they can do.
That's a beautiful message. Thank you very much. And please take back your seats and enjoy the rest of your evening. And Darius.
So we're really, really proud and pleased to have that. It was a wonderful day, and as I said, I really wasn't expecting to win, so I was standing there with a big lump in my throat, and I don't cry. I think it's years now I cried, and I thought, she points this mic at me, I'm going to cry, but I didn't. So it was wonderful. So thank you all again for being here. I'm really delighted, and please, as many times as you want to have committees and pass it on to other committees to come here. We'd love to have you.
Okay, so we will pass that on to the rest of the Assembly in terms of the invitation. So we thank you very much, you and your team, for the very warm welcome that we have received today, and opening up your facilities for us to have the committee. We're equally as proud of your achievements. I think it's certainly well deserved in terms of the recognition that you have received from Europe, but also from the local community and further afield across the north in terms of the work that you do. This is my first visit here, but I had an understanding and sense of the good work that went on in the Shankill Shared Women's Centre. I mean, I was very lucky. Some of us were in a bit early, got a tour of the facilities. We've seen them in the video. So the work that you do here is fantastic. It is an excellent, modern facility which allows you to do the work. I think the work is the important aspect of. So I mean, social activities, promoting life skills, shared education among women, health and well-being. Dealing with social isolation, and obviously the childcare facilities, and much more. So the work that you do is fantastic, and it's always nice to have nice modern facilities. So the best of luck to you and your team for the building and for the service that you provide, and the good work that you provide for the women of Belfast and beyond into the future. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Diane.
No, just again to re-echo those words and to say it's a fabulous facility. It was, I suppose, maybe what the video and all doesn't show, it was hard fought and hard won. I've known Betty for years, and when you're summoned to a meeting by Betty, you always know that there's something at the other end of it. So one day, we were all gathered in Le Mans. She provided us with lunch, and then she said, now listen girls, we need a new premises and we need to find out how to do it. So it is fantastic. It is an amazing building, but it's also amazing for the amount of work that goes on in the building and the outreach to the community. And I suppose, as Betty said, it was done by the community and local women in the community, and I think that is probably unusual, achieving so much, but also amazing. So thank you.
Thank you, Diane.
Okay, Betty, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'll take my trophy with me.
Look after it well.
Don't forget it.
Okay, members, moving on to item number 6 on our agenda. So oral briefing from the Permanent Secretary on community care and patient flow in our hospital. So can I welcome forward Mr. Mike Barr, Permanent Secretary within the Department, Ms. Tracy McCaig, Interim Chief Operating Officer within SPPG, and Mr. Peter Toogood, Deputy Secretary within the Social Services Policy Group. So you're all very, very welcome. You have sent us a briefing paper. I'm going to hand over to yourselves just for introductory remarks. Any further information you want to give us, and then we'll go straight to questions.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So first of all, what a great way to start the afternoon. That was really inspirational. So and very much the kind of ethos that we're trying to build into this idea of neighbourhood health. Yeah. Really, really special. So it's great to be here. And also, as always, I welcome the opportunity to be here for yourselves and account for the way in which we're trying to manage some of the health issues that we face in Northern Ireland. So very much welcome the opportunity this afternoon to talk to you. I think the area that you're particularly interested in this afternoon is a hugely important area. When you look at community care and flow of patients through our system, it's a sentinel kind of indicator as to whether or not the system works, in the sense of how do people progress through our system when they need it. And so I think there's some really important pointers in what we're learning, what we understand, and how that will inform what we need to do next. But I want to start by saying I think none of us believes the way the system's currently working is the way that it needs to. and we know that people are not getting the level of experience, although they often when you do get to our services, you do get high quality care. We have some brilliant staff who are incredibly good at what they do. But just in terms of the way that the system's working at the moment, people aren't, and I'd like to assure anybody who is listening to this or watching this who reads the transcript that we are working incredibly hard to get people's experience of urgent care and the management of their problems through our hospital system back into community, etc., to a level and a standard that we would all want to experience ourselves for our families. So I'd like to assure people we're working incredibly hard in this area. The next thing, really just to say, which I'm sure we'll get into this afternoon, is that health and social care is quite a complex system. So you think from, people managing their own problems through to accessing care in community, the process of referral and or conveyancing, their appearance at ED, the way that ED manages those patients through to admission, and then of course you have discharge, rehab, and sadly for some people palliative care. These are a complex set of operations which ultimately need to sort of correlate, and we know that community services and looking at the flow needs fixing, but the way to fix that is to see the system overall and not just think that actually if you apply capacity into one bit of the system that solves it, because ultimately you need this balance of the way the system operates to make sure that that is a sort of smooth transition through people's care. And we can sometimes be fooled, and I'm not saying that anybody around these tables are, that if you invest more in one bit of the system that solves your problem. Very often it can cause impact later on unless you've had that balance of investment. So I think your attention to this idea of flow is really important and really critical. And I'd want to encourage you to think about how this fits in with the wider issues of who ends up needing our services in the first place in terms of what we're trying to do to improve prevention, what we're trying to do to manage people so that they don't need to be flowed through a hospital system because we can manage their care in the community setting anyway. And just to give you one illustration of that, we are working hard on Programme for Government, as you know, to deliver elective work. If we invest in more diagnostic capacity so we can get to people sooner, more diagnostic capacity by definition will increase the number of people who require treatment. The more people who require treatment, that will put pressure on admissions to our beds. The more people are going through our beds puts pressure on our ability to discharge them and pressure on what we need to sustain them in their own homes. So by actively trying to get more people through diagnostic processes, you have to think about its commensurate impact on other areas. And so in discussing, as we will this afternoon, some of these issues specifically around the community care agenda, and I do think this is an agenda, an area of care where we need to do better in terms of its relationship with the service, because as you know, a lot of community and indeed social care services are provided not by the HSC but commissioned by the HSC, and so getting these relationships right and managing that flow is hugely important, and we need to do that. And of course the solution ultimately is getting the right people into the right place in the system so that you can understand what's needed and manage that process of flow. And we often describe this, I'm sure you're going to talk about this afternoon, and we're happy to answer it on this idea of this is a kind of winter thing. Actually, it's not a winter thing. It's about the way in which you have a baseline of care that we need and think is our routine and is adequate to manage the problems that we're facing. But you need to be able to surge your capacity up and down, which includes beds, workforce, and the process of admission and discharge in order to get this balance right. And if we were at, as I always say, that world-leading edge, what we would have is a really agile system that can flex up and down depending on demand so that no one effectively gets impacted in a bit of our system because we have additional demand because of a respiratory or a communicable disease problem. And so it's a really important discussion today, and I really welcome it. And I just want to say I have Tracy with me, as you know, who is our kind of de facto Chief Operating Officer for the way the HSC works, can get into any detail about that bit of it. And I have Peter Toogood, who is my lead official for responsibility for social care. And again, we can get into any of those areas, and I will ask them if you've got questions of detail to lead on some of the answers on that. But again, just to say it's an important area, and we're really happy to be here to answer questions.
Okay, thank you, thank you very much for that. So, going to go straight into it. The hospital flow is a major issue. So every day the press, including today, are articulating horrific stories about patients' experiences in EDs. They could do that every day of the week, probably from every one of our hospitals. And we've had conversations with yourselves on this before, and we've had conversations on the winter plan. Certainly prior to Christmas, we were hearing from the Minister and others about capacity issues within the home care sector and the reason for delayed discharges. But then we also started to hear, certainly I started to hear from the home care sector that some of the things that they were hearing and we were hearing was at odds with what their experiences was, and that they have lots of capacity, and some of them were saying we could take many more patients if they were discharged from the hospital. And I understand exactly what you're saying about the complications, and it's not just as simple as that. There are many factors surrounding that. But I think I would like to use today as an opportunity just to explore those factors, and more importantly, what the department is doing about it. Because this problem is not a new problem. It's something that our health system has been experiencing, and we should have had long-term plans in place. So I wouldn't like to think that we're here in a couple of years' time hearing the same types of arguments. So I want to just explore the detail of the capacity issue that we're hearing that is available within home care sectors, and why that isn't being utilised, and what are the kind of immediate plans, notwithstanding the resource issues within the department, what are the kind of immediate plans that we're doing to overcome some of these problems?
Okay, well let me pick up on the first point, and then I know Peter will comment on a lot of the work that we're doing with the sector to try and get into a different place. I mean, the truth is that we have not had, in my experience, a strategic relationship with the sector. It's quite varied, as you know. So when we talk about the home care sector, there are people who can take high levels of acuity, they can take dementia, but others can't. And there are some, sort of geographic limitations in how capacity meets the demand in a particular area. We might have capacity in one bit of the Northern Ireland, but not necessarily meets it. So I think we've got to be quite careful about saying the home care sector as though it's a completely homogenous group of services. That they're not. The truth is that what we need to do is have a much more strategic, ongoing relationship with this sector, which looks at capacity that's required, the profile of beds that are needed, the relationship between domiciliary support and residential support, which again is another factor in terms of what's needed for individual patients. And if all we do is spot purchase every now and again when we need that level of service, it's going to be hard to match capacity and demand. And so the work that we've been doing, and I'm going to ask Peter to comment on that because there's quite a lot of work in train, is really to get that kind of strategic relationship. And it is disappointing, I think, that perhaps I would say we've increased capacity generally. If you look at our workforce numbers in health over the last 5 years, significant numbers of additional staff have been put in the system. It's levelled off a little bit, but we've seen 15% increases in things like our medical workforce, our nursing, midwifery workforce. So there's been a lot of capacity increase, and yet we're still facing this problem.
Sorry to interrupt you, but in terms of workforce, is there a workforce issue within domiciliary care?
Well, I'll let Peter talk about the way in which we're trying to get into that, but you have to have I'll come back to this point about commensurate increase, because the sector that lives on commercial income, which is what it does, mainly 90% of it is in that sector that has to generate a profit. The balance of workforce and whose responsibility that is really falls to a strong relationship about what we need from that sector, as opposed to just, as I say, being in a spot purchasing arrangement whereby people can't increase or reduce staffing on an ad hoc basis. They need to have some level of certainty and understanding of what our need is. And the last point before I ask Peter to talk about the process of engaging with the sector is that the data that we're now getting because of having Encompass and GP data really should allow us to be very, very good at this. But in the past, we've not been as good as we would want to be, and that's why the work that Peter's been leading with the collaborative with the sector, I think is really important to understand. So, Peter.
Thanks, Mike. I think hopefully the committee's aware, it's been mentioned probably a number of times through either written or oral briefings, the forum that we set up in 2023, which was the Social Care Collaborative Forum, and that was really much, and that's a forum that I chair, and that was very much aimed at saying, I suppose based on the principle that such are the complexity, the breadth and the complexity of the issues in adult social care, not one single sector can address those, which is why we have statutory colleagues around the table, independent sector colleagues, and that's either private sector or voluntary community sector colleagues, trade union officials, representatives, as well as our registrar in the Social Care Council. So it really is that collaborative effort. We've focused, I'll be honest, it's been a process. We've had to build relationships, we've had to build trust, and we've had to get comfortable with working with each other, because that wasn't necessarily always the case. The relationships part of that were quite adversarial. And when we formed, we recognised we need to reform. So we had Part of People as the report. We had the reform of adult social care consultation. We know we need to reform the system, but we also knew that we needed to address the immediate issues facing the system as well, the immediate presenting issues. So we started work on, okay, we want to do the big picture stuff, but we want to pick out some immediate issues that we want to address collectively. And that's why we've set out some of that work in your briefing paper for today. So things like early review teams, looking at packages that have been given, are they still needed at the same level that they were originally commissioned for? Protection of care packages, that's when individuals go in to hospital and their packages are protected, and again it's now protected for 14 days across all trusts. That wasn't the case last year. We've brought consistency there. Looking at block home care packages, where there are challenges of rurality, how do we commission our services differently? And issues like Careline Live, which is really aimed at our statutory sector provision, mobilising our resources in the most efficient way possible. And there's lots of individual work going on, because there's no one silver bullet that's going to fix this. We have to work on multiple fronts and take those incremental gains to try and address the issues. If I could give you an example, because I believe we're not there yet, and we've lots to do, and you heard challenges that and trusted assessor, sorry, I can't forget the trusted assessor model.
So see, when you mention trusted, sorry, I'm probably going to interject right across all areas here. So will the trusted assessor model, because that was one issue that we heard from the sector who were saying this was a great idea, but it's not operational right across the board. Why have we have good ideas? Are they not being implemented right across the board?
I mean, let me just first answer that. This is a really problematic area for Northern Ireland, and it's this inconsistency, and we have some brilliant examples, but we haven't, and the whole point of building that committee in common that can take a shared decision allows us to be able to standardise what we're doing, and I think there's a whole raft of areas where standardising care, and so the work on a single job description for the trusted assessor is now in progress, and that way of working is becoming much more the way to do things than perhaps where we've historically been, which is when one trust has had an idea, come up with something and just progressed it. We have many, many more. I mean, I'd like to reassure the committee that if you looked at the way in which now, through that committee in common, which is a governance structure, but the way in which the chief execs work together, the way in which we have networks of people from each trust looking at what we're describing as sensible care to standardise pathways, there's so much more of that and less of that, and that is that's just a cultural thing that we're really pushing forward hard, and specific on the trusted assessor, there is to move, Peter, to a single.
So we will have the trusted assessor model will be universal across all the trusts in a short time.
So that's the intention. So again, yes, we had a piecemeal start to that process, but there's a trusted assessor operation in each trust, but it's not consistent yet. And we've been working with trusts and with independent sector providers over the past year to standardise the job description, to look at governance structures, and we've been working collaboratively to do that. And again, we're hopefully bringing I suppose a consistent approach that's needed by Q1 of 26-27, the next financial year. So work is well progressed on that. And again, I suppose achieving consistency across trusts is a challenge for us in the department and the SPPG, because we want to bring consistency where we can and where it's appropriate to do so, but also recognising that there are specifics within each trust area that must allow for a degree of local focusing.
Sorry to interrupt you again,
no,
but I mean that was another issue that we're getting in terms of the inconsistency. We're in some of these scenarios, some trusts are maybe performing slightly better in terms of discharge. Can the department do things in areas where trusts are maybe less adept at doing that? And what actions are you taking?
Yeah, I can probably speak a little to that. And committee might remember when I was last with you around the winter plan piece at that time. What we had done this year was we invested, the only investment really that we had from within our base budget was £10 million into all of the area of flow and scheduled care, the community care piece and the discharge. And different trusts had different planks in place of what good looks like, and what we were trying to do was to move more of them to the same. For example, in Northern Trust did not have a hospital at home model, so we've now put that in place. So what we're trying to do is to bring incrementally everyone up. Conversely, Northern Trust had a great same day emergency treatment. They had a better suite of that, and we're trying to bring other trusts up. So given the way that we are working to try and standardise what good looks like, because if we can bring everybody up to that same platform, we should get more of a consistent result. On discharges, we have some that are ahead and some that need to follow where they have tread. And I think that's now about where we are pushing with them. We use support and intervention. We use, getting it right first time. We use peer support. We're using an awful lot to try and do that. But yes, we have a role in absolutely trying to direct what good looks like, not on our own. I mean, this is working as a system. We have to work. So where we can see it's better elsewhere and we get that view and that oversight, then we will try to bring others with us.
Could I add to that? In your paper, in terms of home care, we completed a round of roundtables, a series of roundtables, and that does a disservice to what actually went on. It wasn't a talking shop or people just sitting around saying, "Oh yeah, what should we do?" It was, again, the same principles as the collaborative forum of independent sector providers, statutory sector providers sitting down, talking about what is good, what's best practice, what works well, how can we identify opportunities for efficiency, and what are the opportunities for regional consistency. And again, we set out in your paper the issues around, for example, South Eastern Trust doing stuff, Northern Trust, Belfast Northern Trust. And again, the feedback from those sessions was immensely positive across the board. I'll be honest, you never know when you go into those whether it will be, but certainly that was an attempt, an endeavour to say, here are some practical things now. And again, there was a mutual challenge around the table. Well, why are we not doing it, or why can't we do that? And again, it was that mutual accountability, fitting very much into that governance structure of committees in common principle at that top level. But at this operational level, there was a desire to do something. And again, it's very much set the tone for how we want to move forward in the broader reform process.
So I've got three very quick, and we have a lot to get through, so I'm going to ask very quick questions, hoping to get quick answers. Me and you, Peter, were at an event probably February or March of last year where we talked about the good announcement by the Minister in terms of the living wage. We all expected that to come into play. And the Minister himself has said, in answer to some number of questions I've asked him, that some of the decisions he's had to make are actually counter-strategic, which is really disappointing because we all know the impact that have. I get frustrated as a member where the Minister's saying he has to make decisions that are anti-strategic, that have an impact on health service. And I take your point, Perm Secretary, when you said about the more successful we are in one aspect, it actually might be more costly in terms of financial terms, are put bigger strain on, and another thing. But I mean, we've heard about the cost of a secondary care bed versus the cost of domiciliary care packages or care, and you know, the differential is substantial. So you know, surely we should be in a position to invest in aspects of our healthcare that could save our healthcare. So when are we going to get to a point where the Minister can make strategic decisions rather than anti-strategic decisions?
Yeah. So I mean, I'm sure you'll come back to real living wage in a bit more detail. I'm happy to answer questions on that. But the whole principle of what we set out in July about moving resources from our hospitals into our neighbourhoods is all about exactly what you've just asked there, Chair. It is based on the principle that too many people who could get care at home, maintaining their independent living, supported to avoid deterioration of problems, avoiding the risk that we know that hospitalisation can occur in terms of deteriorating condition and communicable disease, etc. This is exactly why we are trying to move to a neighbourhood model. And that neighbourhood model, and I'll say this now because we're just finalising our planning guidance for next year. And in there, one of the statements that we've made over the 3 years, and I really do hope we can get a 3-year multi-year budget, is that over that period of time, we will invest more as a percentage of our total spend in primary care and general practice, social care, mental health and the voluntary sector as a percentage of our now, we don't know what that total package will look like over that period of time, but that is the only way that we would do that, and therefore that will allow us to be able to do exactly what you're saying the Minister was not able to do this year because he wanted to do that, but the way in which we planned into the year, if you like, we were on the back foot, and we won't be on the back foot going into the year ahead. And the neighbourhood model, I know it has a bit of a catch-all, but is precisely about taking strategic decisions. You can't just announce it. You've got to put workforce, funding flow, estates, organisation development for those groups to work together, strategic relationship with your independent providers, better contracting with the voluntary sector, better contracts with GPs and community pharmacy to make that work. But that is precisely what we are trying to do. And you know, I would really welcome coming back to this committee, say, when we are starting to see those neighbourhoods in place, and just try and explain to you how you can see, if you like, that this isn't rhetorical, this is actually going to make a difference.
Okay, and I think we would be happy to have you, but I mean, I could spend an hour and a half that you have here asking you questions yourself, but that would be unfair. Last question, should have asked it first, but I wanted to deliberately leave it till the end. Do we know, sitting here today, how many people are in hospital beds that are fit for discharge?
We know it about what's exactly happening at this day.
Yeah. And we actually publish that now, so just members might want to see it's online, hscni.net, if I've remembered my site. So we have started just very recently to publish a range of snapshot information as to what with complex delayed discharges, the number of surge beds we have, and the number of attendances at our EDs, etc. So you can see that if you go onto the site, along with other information around our waiting lists. But as of today, what we refer to as medically optimised for discharge with complex discharge needs. So that snapshot at 10:30 on the 3rd of February, which is the last we published, 550. I think actually someone gave me maybe 558 yesterday, so it's in and around 550.
And that's across all our hospitals?
That's across all of our hospitals. And
is it detailed in terms of each hospital?
It'll tell you it by trust.
Okay.
It'll tell you at my trust in that information. Now we will have...
So 500, over 500, nearly 600?
550.
Okay, 550. Okay, that's a lot.
It is a lot.
And as I say,
now you will always expect to have a number of people at any one time. It'll never be a zero number. Yeah. So there'll always be a process to move through. The issue for us is how long are you delayed, because that's the excess bed days that we're trying to work better and more efficiently in. And obviously, once we have that number of delayed discharges, that impacts on the overall flow of our hospital. It impacts on the overall management of our emergency departments. It impacts back further then into our NIA space. Yeah. So all of those things have to work at the same time, and we have to invest over a wide range, and we have to put focus on productivity and efficiency across a wide range to make this work.
And in terms of how long those those people are being delayed? Because in the walkabout during the South West acute hospital visit, I was told that there had been a man and a woman in for over a year that were fit for discharge but couldn't get a package.
I think you will always find, you can find a case that would be particularly long, in any of our hospitals you could have a particular case, and I can't get into that, but we do have all of the dates and the length of times and that they're doing. If you're in longer, it's usually a very complex package that you're requiring. It's not something, so that complexity and length of time will have a direct correlation between two.
I don't have a question on the minimum living wage. I just want to get it over the line as quickly as possible, because I think that absolutely
and we are committed to that, and so in our planning assumptions for next year we are saying we will do that as quickly as we possibly can. It is a priority alongside as the commitment to make pay the first call on expenditure, not the last call, which we've been in previous years, which is a great step forward and has to happen.
So I think,
however tough the finances, by the way.
People working in the sector would like to hear, they certainly would be happy to hear that, but a date would be a really good thing if you could give it.
Look, we will try to give that as much, but we don't have a budget as yet, so we'll have to work through that. But in our planning guidance, we signal that as a pre-commitment, in a sense that is one of the things that we are committed to as a priority. And I know a minister would say that very clearly, that he would. That is a big priority for him, given what we had to do last year, which was very sad.
And obviously the Health Committee and Health Committee members have a duty to question and cajole and scrutinise the decisions of the Minister. I think we also have a duty to facilitate and help the Minister. I think a 3-year budget is essential for all our public services, but particularly the health, and I certainly as Chair of the Health Committee want to see a 3-year budget being agreed with the Executive.
Yeah, and I won't go into too much detail, but when you look at the level of challenge that we're facing going into that, there is a decision which I'm talking to colleagues about who are very positive about it, and they are talking to UK Government, the Treasury about, is that recovering in 1 year as an accountable officer as opposed to being given a 3-year recovery is the difference between taking short-term counter-strategic issues and being able to invest in that change to make strategic decisions. So I'm arguing very strongly for, could we have a plan across our 3 years that allows us to recover, invest in the change, get into a financially sustainable position, and at the moment that's being received pretty well, but we haven't got any commitments as yet that we could do that. And the accounting officer, I'm sure if you had Durrania in front of you here, she would say, well, the accounting officer duty are to live within your means, and that would probably end up being something like a double-digit efficiency ask of us in 1 year, whereas over the course of a 3-year period we could make that more manageable. So I think it's a great point, thank you. And we would really welcome your support on that, really welcome.
Okay, thank you. Colin?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for coming today. Permanent Secretary, you said at the start that the way that patient flow is working is an indication of the state of the health service. Yeah. Are you presiding over a failed health service because it's not working?
I think I would really not want to describe it as that, and that's because how hard people are working in our service. But very often our people are working really hard despite the way that we're organised at the moment. And so it's certainly not, to me, a failed service, and will save lives every day that would otherwise be lost. So I wouldn't agree with that statement. What I can tell you, and I think I've told this committee before, is that we spend a lot of money per patient. It's pretty much equal and slightly above the other nations. We don't have that resource quite in the right place, hence we need to reset. So I think at the moment it's not as good as it needs to be, and we're aware of that. We're not here saying that everything's wonderful, but I think we do recognise what we need to do now that would make it better.
You see, my sympathy is with those 550 people that are sitting today ready to go home and they're waiting and they're not able to. But my concern is with those people today that are dialing 999 for an ambulance right at the very start of that journey and can't get it. Do you know, my constituency of South Down, do you know what the percentage attainment is for Category 1 calls hitting the target that they're supposed to be there? So whenever you dial 999, there's a target of around 8 minutes. Do you know what the percentage is for South Down for reaching that target?
could ask my chief operator.
Yeah, and I don't have it broken down to Southdown, but I can tell you if Category 1, our December position is we were at mean attempts of 13. Now that's against an 8-minute target, so it'll be different across different areas, whether it's a rural area or a more inner city area. And in our Category 2 was 107 minutes, which again our Category 2 we would be hoping to reach 18. So it was under very severe pressure through December, and that will not have improved during January.
I would wish for the residents of Southdown that we could get 13% of the time, because it's not, it's 10% of the time. 10% of the time that my constituents ring 999 for an ambulance, Category 1, does the health service get there in time? That's why I think it is a failed service, not the people. People are worked to the bone. They can't give any more. It's the system that's not working, and that's the system that you're delivering. And that's why I say my concern is for those people who in their moment of need can't get it. And that's why we have to get this right. Because 90% of the time not getting a target is not success.
Yeah, so I agree. I agree with you in terms of that particular thing. The challenge that we would face is therefore, how do you, let's say you said to me, you haven't, but let's say you said to me, the key thing is we need to have more crews on the road, we need more ambulances, or we need more facilities to admit people quicker through A&E when they present. If we are to do that as a system, it's certainly not me, but if we are to do that as a system, you're then making choices about where does that additional resource or support come from. And I would argue that there's, that makes it very difficult in terms of other areas of care. We would obviously want at your most urgent point of care that is guaranteed to you, that you can get your ambulance within that certain, and that becomes our process. So in our planning guidance we are signalling reducing the timetable for ambulance handover, because the faster you reduce your ambulance handover, the more quicker you can release a crew, the faster we can get to the next case. So the question is, how do you then get to a point where we can move people through our hospitals, because ambulances are usually waiting because they can't get someone in to be admitted or seen. So we do the triaging pretty quickly, but that's where the question is, how do you fix the system? And I'd love to tell you I could fix the system really, really quickly, but it does take time, unfortunately. And there's a great phrase I think Nigel Edwards from the Nuffield Trust when he was there used, which is you're trying to fix the engine whilst the car's running. That is hard. If we had additional growth money, which we don't, we have a deficit we're having to manage, it becomes harder to do that as fast as we would like. But we do know, we've talked to people in London about the speed at which they've improved ambulance services, and there are some good news stories in ambulance, but that is one which we have to work harder on.
It's interesting you mentioned that. Do you know how long the longest ambulance has been outside the Ulster Hospital today?
I don't. 15
hours. That's somebody in the back of an ambulance for 15 hours. And that's not fair on those crews. That's going to be at least 2 shifts, maybe moving into the 3rd shift. And then it has the knock-on effect for people, obviously of lower acuity in terms of needing an ambulance. But the wait time for some people for ambulances today is 24 hours. That actually means they rang for an ambulance yesterday. And if we don't get them in the next block of hours, it'll be tomorrow before we get to them. Yeah. Again, not the people. The people in our health service are worked to the bone. But there's a system. And if we could just get a final question on the system, Chair. Because we know that the spending has gone up in terms of domiciliary care, because we can see that year on year there's more that's been spent in it. And that there are extra hours that are available. But if it's not working and it's down to commissioning, is it you at the department that commission, is it you at SPPG that commission, or is it the trust, one of whom we've got coming up after the commission? Who's getting the commissioning wrong if it's not being able to deliver the service that we actually need?
So commissioning is a very interesting word, because it means a lot of different things to different people. We allocate resources, and for the first time in about 11 years we've set some priorities against those resources. If you talk about who pays for social care, that's basically the trust who will buy that out of their allocation. It's not a straightforward, simple answer, unfortunately, Colin.
So, for example, if you've got a hospital that has got a patient and it could pay for them to go into a care home place, but it doesn't have the money to do it. So the service is commissioned, but the money's not available. Is that because the department doesn't give the money? Is it because there isn't the correct SPPG commission, or is it because the trust decides not to spend it?
Okay,
Who's not?
Right. So let me sort of just describe. So from 2016 to about 2022, the department's total budget went up by 6% of the Northern Ireland allocation. So more and more money was coming in. I talked about some of those workforce numbers. We were having those problems then. And in fact, if you look at the comparison of some of those challenges that you face there about ambulance times and waiting times and triage times in ED, actually there's marginal improvement on last year, despite the fact that we've been able to make, I think, about £400 million of saving, which we've had to do to balance our budgets given what we were given. I've said to this committee, I do not believe it's the right thing to keep going back to Northern Ireland's budget holding and say we need more and more for health and care, because in essence you'd be taking that away from starting life for young families, leisure, housing, transport, community cohesion. So we've got to do better with the resource we have. So I'll come back to it. The answer is not to sort of think we should be arguing for more and more funding. The answer is, how can we realign the funding we've got to spend it better? So yes, commissioning is failing, but commissioning fails because our current system is designed to get the results it gets. I believe the reset will start to change that, but it doesn't happen overnight. It's very difficult to say our neighbourhood will manage away a number of people who are currently ended up in hospital because there isn't the alternative in our neighbourhood settings. But I can demonstrate to you, if we could get management of frail elderly in our communities better than we've currently got it, that would put because the flip side of the pressure in one bit, putting pressure on others, if you release pressure in one bit, it releases pressure in the other. So I would argue that we have a plan, we need time to deliver it. But I do want to say, because I recognise what you're saying, it is not acceptable, even with the current state of play, even with the engine running, we can and should do better around an ambulance having to wait 20 hours. We really should. That's not acceptable. And it is regrettable, and we're working hard to try and fix that.
Chair, I'll conclude just that, I appreciate what you said, Permanent Secretary, not more money, but it's how we spend it.
Yeah.
Fanny Bengoa said that 10 years ago, and here we are today, and we're no further forward.
And let me come straight back. I think Bengoa had the plan. Mm-hmm. The question is, what did we do to change the system to deliver the plan? What did we do to change the mindsets that stopped us doing what we're currently doing, thinking that's the right thing to do? So I think the difference is, I've been asked this on a number of occasions, what's the difference between now and Bengoa is that we have a plan to deliver our vision, and we're actually challenging the mindsets about, oh, well, someone will come and bail us out, or this, it doesn't matter enough to us, and all these kind of mindsets about what we're doing. And I think you are starting to see some real change about people's attitudes towards, we have to spend our money differently because there won't be new money, and we know we're letting down patients, and people hate that. I know. The worst thing that can happen for staff is when they have to say, we can't do what we know is the right thing to do. And we've got to, that's what we collectively, I know he's been to Jennifer and colleagues from Belfast Trust, everybody's really trying to get this better than it is now. And I'm not certain with Bengoa, it wasn't just seen as a nice strategy description. There wasn't the attention to detail to implement it that there really should have been. And that's what we're determined to change this time.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks. Danny?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation today. I just want to take it back to December. Myself and the Chair visited an A&E on a Sunday night, 9 o'clock on a Sunday night, just before Christmas, just to see what the pressures were like. And at the time, so this is 9 o'clock at night, when we arrived there, we were told that flow had stopped in the hospital. Major hospital in Northern Ireland, flow had completely stopped at 9 o'clock on a Sunday night. There were 9 ambulances outside. The longest waiting ambulance at the time was 6 hours and 21 minutes, but obviously that was only going to go up. There were 114 patients in the department, 52 trolley waits for admission, and no beds in the hospital at all. There were over 100 medically fit patients in the hospital that couldn't get out. Some of them had been there for weeks. waiting care packages and placements. And just to go back as well, the longest wait in A&E at that time had been 4 days and 16 hours. So somebody had been in A&E for 4 whole days and 16 hours at that point, and there was no flow, so there was no movement. So subsequent ambulances that were coming in, anybody else who was coming into A&E that night, were going to stay in A&E because there was nowhere else for them to go. I can't get my head around those numbers. If you have 50 patients who need to be admitted and you've got 100 who are medically fit, I don't see how that if you remove even half of those patients who are medically fit, flow moves again. So why aren't we investing more about building that capacity in the community? Why don't we have that fixed? We've known this for years and it has got worse and worse for years. So why haven't we done that? And what are we doing now about it?
Okay. Tracy, do you want to pick up sort of direct on that?
Yeah, and to say that we aren't, we are, and we have invested. But remember, when we talked about the £10 million investment, we were trying to push that investment into the best places we could at that point in time.
And where does that?
Those investments that we put through, I think you took committee the last time, but in general, we were talking about increased hospital at home across our sites, additional short stay inpatient beds, additional step down and intermediate care beds, all required for flow. Field day assessment at the front door, expansion of ambulatory and same day emergency care, multidisciplinary teams in the ED to try and get the appropriate care started from the very front door, and enhanced capacity for early review teams that we've talked about, and further discharge coordination. In parallel to that, it's not just about commissioning or buying, if you're taking our way out of the position that we're in, it's also about being more productive with what we've got. So when we looked at our domiciliary care, it was our early review teams and those hours. Now some people had an early review and needed more, a lot of people needed less, and that rebalancing of those hours to recycle into the system much more quickly to assist us to do that. There is more for us to do, and the complexity of the need for the types of beds, the types of packages that we need, we're having to push into that. And some of that requires investment, and some of that will require a significant change. So in all of those, it isn't just one thing. So that we've discussed, you have to be able to move lots of things forward at the same time. And I think I remember saying to the committee at the time, would we like to have more to do more? Absolutely. But what we have to do is to make the best of what we have and bring everybody up to a level of what, so that they all have a hospital at home, that they all have those levers that they can pull. And that, for example, in our ambulance service, they're see, hear, treat. So while you are waiting, unfortunately, for an ambulance, if you're not in the most life-threatening, that you have access to advanced paramedics, that you have access to support either over the phone or to see someone directly face-to-face. So all of those levers are being pulled. And if we talk only about discharge, that's only one part of a very, very complex patchwork that we're trying to change.
The bottleneck in the system is clearly at discharge.
It is.
When you have 100 medically fit patients and 50, and we've heard today you have 550, I think, medically fit.
It is a significant problem for us. It's significant, and I'm not going to say it's not, and it's a significant area of our focus. But it's also about, so when you're thinking about flow, it's the rate of people coming in and the rate going out. So we also have to look at who can be managed in a better way, more proactively, anticipating care needs, keeping you close to your home or in your home, wherever that may be. So we also have to look at that. Because if you ignore that, all you do is to bring more people into hospital and they go through a process and we take. So if we can manage both parts of that, that's what we're trying to do. But it is a major problem and one of the major focus for us. Absolutely.
I appreciate that, and this has become an all-year problem because we talk about escalation beds, and in reality the escalation beds are there 12 months a year.
They change at different periods of time, but I mean, again, on the transparency, we have now given out those numbers of beds, and at the minute we have, and that was part of the plan. So for surge, when we talk about that, and we talk about pressures all year round, that is part of what we do. Now they are higher than we want them to be, but we have about 268 surge beds in the system as of the 3rd of February when we put the figures out there, and we are open to saying that's what they are. We're being entirely transparent.
In my experience, those beds are open all year. And
they are not open.
Corridor beds are on wards and they're open all year. They have patients in them all year.
It's the volume and the number depend, because when you have more pressures, we know in the winter we have more requirement for our services because of winter viruses and other things. So that will flex and change, and it'll be something you'll be able to see those numbers, because we will put them out there now on a regular basis for you to see.
Just make a point about those discharges. If you do the maths as you have, 100 people. First off, what was really interesting about this year in terms of telling us where we need to focus our energy was really clear. We didn't have additional numbers coming to the front door. So in other words, we seem to be able to manage the kind of flow in. We really struggled after the 4-day bank holiday at the weekend around getting people back out. And if you lose 2 days of discharge, right, the way the system works is that bottleneck then becomes a big issue, and it probably takes you about 3 or 4 weeks to clear and get back down. And that assumes that you don't have any other sort of additional pressures at that later point. But what we've also been able to do is look at what are the causes of those discharges, because they're often different. So it could be waiting for a care home place for a particular individual, and if there might be a place available but it's not somebody who has also got dementia, for example, we couldn't take that bed. We have waiting for domiciliary packages, which is something we have sometimes relatives, families not particularly feeling confident to take the individual back into home, and that's a small group, and I'm certainly not blaming anybody for that, but that's a factor. And then we have things that are within the processes of the hospital, and what we've said, and our chief execs and our trusts are very happy, I think, to respond to that, is if it's anything within the gift of the hospital, then we'll move quickly to eradicate that. So even sometimes the smallest delays come because we've not got the pharmacy aspect ready, for people to be discharged with the Medicare. So and
a couple of hours usually.
There are a lot of areas where just creating discharge areas where people can release a bed but still be waiting, but they're waiting in comfort, etc. So this is not 100 that you could just go bang, that's the solution. We need to think about how do you look at all those areas, and if there is a silver lining to that cloud, it's given us more information about where we need to focus our attention, and that's what we've tried to react to.
Okay. Yeah. I was pleased to hear about the strategic direction, that you appreciate the importance of the strategic direction on this, and we have talked about the Social Care Collaborative Forum. We were told last week, we had a briefing from the independent health and care providers who have paused engagement with the Social Care Collaborative Forum due to frustrations about outcomes. Can you tell me about their engagement and what they're doing to re-engage with them?
Yeah, we're aware, well, the Minister met with the independent providers last November, and they explained the frustrations, and it was an opportunity for the Minister to hear those frustrations and to offer some I suppose, way forward in terms of trying to resolve that. From a personal perspective, I worked closely with these individuals for the past 3 years, and I hold them in the highest regard. I think their knowledge, their expertise of their sector, their desire to want the best for patients and their service users is second to none. So the fact they've paused their engagement is of a great personal disappointment, as well as I think that the debate around reform and how it goes on it's much less because they're not there. But we do have to move on, and we will move on in terms of moving it forward. There were a number of issues that they raised and agreed with the Minister, and hopefully we have movement on those, and I would like to think that would start to shift the dial in terms of their re-engagement. We agreed in terms of the justification paper that the Fair Work Forum had prepared for the real living wage. That was basically, why should we pay the real living wage? The Minister agreed to publish that, and that has been through the Minister, and we'll be publishing that at the start of next week. So that was an ask of the IHCP, and we'll deliver that early next week. They talked about a need to do an independent economic review of the cost of care. What's the fair cost of care? And we've a meeting now scheduled with them for later in the month. That's an important piece of work, so we understand what's going on in the system, what it's costing, but it has to be done in the context of everything we've talked about, a reform system. What is the fair cost of care in a reform system? So we have to work through that with them, but we've now a meeting scheduled for that. They were concerned about whether the money they were getting would meet the government imposed costs, rising national insurance, for example. And again, we've committed to meet with them on that. In fact, I think they're meeting this afternoon.
They are.
Yep. To hear about that. Again, we can't do anything in year. The pressures that Mike talked about are real. The financial pressure.
Can you just check, you're meeting with the Providers Association this afternoon?
Finance team. So my Director of Finance is meeting and possibly somebody from a community care team as well. They are meeting this afternoon, but that's been a long-standing annual, couple of times a year meeting that we have continued, and indeed that's happening today.
Okay. So again, and that's with a view to improving our model going forward to try and address some of their concerns, because it's not possible to do anything in the current financial year. We've corrected the record with yourselves in terms of the percentage figure that was quoted as to who's in receipt of real living wage. And they also want, a bit like yourself, Chair, that you want to know when the real living wage is going to be implemented, and they want that. And as Mike said, it's just not possible for us to do that at the moment because we don't have a budget, and we need to work through the process.
There was a lot of hurt and a lot of trust lost whenever that promise was broken. I think a lot of stock had been put into it, and then when the U-turn was made and the promise was broken, I think a lot of trust was lost. It was regrettable, and certainly the sector felt that. Can I ask as well, they have also raised with us, well, they've alleged that one of the reasons that, and the Chair had alluded to it, the capacity within the system in the independent sector, when it comes to a certain point in the year, that trusts are not using their budget to buy up the capacity in a way that would be beneficial, and in fact they're lessening it in order to save money on their budgets. We heard that directly, that allegation directly from the independent sector. Have you any evidence that trusts are not using up their budget to buy up care that is needed by the patients who are lying in hospital wards?
I have no evidence of that at all, and I think it was certainly something our trust can speak to, but I have no evidence of that.
Would you be able to refute that at all with any figures?
I can't give you that, but we do look at the numbers of care home packages that we have each year. We look at our dumb care packages. I'm not seeing anything that's evidentially from that higher level view that would indicate yes or no, but again it's a complex picture of what may be happening on, so I couldn't confirm or deny in any position, but we do look at that and the rise in costs in those areas. It is rising, so I don't recognise it, and I certainly haven't had a conversation with the trust in that position. Now it's different, so it's about again what type of package we're talking about. So if there was a vacancy in a particular home in a particular place, it's again about matching needs. So for those 550 people, do we have the right bed in the right place to meet the needs of the individual? So again, I think it could be perspectives in that, but it's certainly not something I personally recognise.
Okay. Now, certainly it was the people who were held in the highest regard that have made that comment to us, that trusts are not using their budget in the way that would be most conducive to buying up the care. It was quite an allegation, because it's in the winter and it's in the time when we have that increase in pressures. So the suggestion is that people then are lying in hospital much longer than they actually should in order to save money on budgets.
I'm sure our trust will want to comment on that more, but it's not something that I've heard repeated to me.
No problem. Just one last question. The trusted assessor role is something that the independent sector have been looking forward for a long time, and they've said that they had issues with some of the assessments that were being carried out in the hospitals. 1 in 7 of the assessments, I think, was rejected pretty much out of hand. So it says in the paper that the trusted assessor role is going to come into force in Q1 26-27, which is April this year. Are those people in place?
Sorry, I haven't the detail of that. I just know it's about the working and the reach. So some of the trusts will have a trusted assessor. I met with one in the Ulster Hospital recently to find out just how was it working, how was it going, was it working the way we intended it. And I think it was a very positive experience and a very positive feedback from that individual, who worked obviously very closely with providers in their local area. So what we're looking at in Q1, I won't commit to a particular month, but in Q1 that we want all of our trusts to have that. We would have an ambition to make that a further 7-day week, but that's investment, that's money, so we have to work through that. But it is absolutely the right thing to do, and to try and get that regional consistency piece is really important to us, and that's what we're trying for Q1.
So there are people there. It's not consistent. It's not 7 days a week yet, and that's why this work has been ongoing. So I think the Q1 deadline is around having an agreed model, an agreed way of working. Then we need to now start implementing it, and trusts need to implement that, because it may mean looking at existing job roles as to because there's overlapping with another person or who's doing another bit of the system that maybe could work on that. So that change process, or management of change, I think we've called it, to bring other roles in to fulfil the regional job description that has been agreed over the past year. So no, I don't think it will be in, as in fully up and running, but certainly we know what we're aiming towards, which we didn't have up until now.
Does that job description match with the independent sector's requests?
Yes, they have been working on the task and finish group that has combined that, yeah.
Thank you.
Noah?
Thank you. I have a few quick questions, but following on from that, can I just ask why the trusted assessor role it will make a difference in terms of what we hope to see and the benefit from it? I think it would be important to set that out.
Well, for me, the importance, and certainly the conversation I was having in the Ulster Hospital, was about trust, and it says it in the it does what it says in the tin. It's about a trust between the independent sector providers to say, if you have assessed in the hospital, this is someone I can trust to come out with the right assessment and do the right match with the provider. And then that makes it much more a speedy process, that we're not waiting on two parts of the system to agree. We've actually got something that can be done once and actually work together. Now, we will have to watch, even with the regional job description, when that goes in and when we get it, we will be watching to make sure that it actually delivers what it is we're expecting, which is much more faster matching of need to availability. And we've other things in that as well. We're trying to digitise then the capacity that we have within our care home sector, for example, so that we have got much more information in that space to make the whole thing work a lot more efficiently, and that's really what we're trying to do.
Can I just add a really quick thing that we're doing, which I think will be a bit of a game changer. So at the moment we don't use clinical decision making tools to help the clinicians make a decision on referral, admission or discharge. Okay, so it gets very variable. So some practices will refer different people for different problems that will be managed by one practice and not by another. A resident doctor may well admit somebody that a more senior doctor would have said, oh, we can manage you outside of hospital. And certainly on discharge, at what point would you be ready to discharge? We don't necessarily have what are the discharge procedures that would trigger we're now into a process of discharge. So introducing clinical decision-making tools will actually allow us to standardise. Now there'll be occasions where someone, because you can manually override them, you can say they met the criteria, but actually I wasn't confident that the care was there ready to avoid an admission, for example, and will never need anybody's granny outside of hospital. But at that point you understand, why did I override, what was missing, and it may well be that that individual didn't understand the system well enough as a resident doctor. They might be just coming to practice, or it may well be that we genuinely didn't have that service outside of hospital that they needed, which will help us then put it into place. So I think variability is not just about different interpretations of a job description. We have a variability problem, but the software now allows you to say, does this individual meet the criteria for admission? Does this person require discharge because we've now got to that level? And these are clinically evidenced. They're not telling doctors to do something they're not comfortable with. This is what the evidence would say about the presenting problems, the vital signs. That makes a huge difference. It will really help the clinicians make the right decisions.
Can I just add, on a very practical level, before trusted assessor, we would have to have waited for care homes to send people out to assess. So there's that delay, whereas you have an individual there at the moment 5 days a week, but we need it 7 days a week. So it's that additional person on the ground there, ready doing and speeding up and oiling that process, rather than waiting for various care homes to send people in.
Thank you for that. I think that's helpful. I want to ask a question just on flow plans within the winter preparedness plan. I think the figure was 10,000 hours in terms of additional GP hours in care homes. I think I said that right. Was that delivered, or was there the capacity there to deliver that? Have we been able to evaluate the impact both on patients being able to receive it and GPs being able to carry it out?
Yes, and that was, I think, referring to the proactive care. Those were the care plans that our GPs were put in place, and indeed in that space we're actually likely to make additional funding. We have already increased the funding level for that to allow more to happen, to continue, and we are looking to see whether we can squeeze any more out of the budget to make more happen in that space. So, it's a really important bit, and it's a really critical plank of what we're doing now and what we need to continue and do more of into the future. The proactivity and managing people from where your own home is, wherever that may be, with our primary care function. It's an absolute plank of our neighbourhood, and it's been invaluable this year, and a real appreciation to our GPs who have done not only what we set out to do, but more than.
Okay. And is that something then that could possibly become recurrent if this is something that's working?
So I want to say something very positive. I mean, first of all, I just want to acknowledge, even though we've had some discussions with GPs and they've been taking some collective action, they've worked really hard through this period, really hard, and just want to recognise just how hard they've worked, despite the fact that they're in some level of dispute with us, and also to let the committee know that we received correspondence this week from them saying that they are coming back around the table to look at the opportunity of a new contract and to discuss next year's contract. And we would see them playing a big part in terms of leadership in the neighbourhood model. So that's really positive. I know last time I was here we were still in dispute, but actually we've got that start now. Fragile, but it's. I just want to thank them for the work they have been doing this winter, despite the fact they've been in a contract dispute with us.
I think that's important. The committee members also received the letter from the BMA to say about re-entering into negotiations, and I think it's really important that the general funding and allocation of the GRGP services is crucial and core to that.
And that's why committing to that, increasing the percentage of money that we spend as a proportion of our total spend is exactly the right thing to do over the next 3 years.
And I have another, again, I'm hoping these will be quick enough. You said, Mike, a number of questions ago that for the first time in 11 years we've put priorities against allocations, and I just want to know why, and if you can expand.
Why we've done that?
Why? It's just for the first time.
Okay. So I don't know why it stopped. There is a sort of commitment that says there would be an annual plan produced, if you like. We've had that in a variety of forms, but not in the sense that. So the system that I grew up in and was a chief executive for 15 years produced an annual planning and priorities guidance, and that effectively set out what are the key things that we expect you to do with the money that we're giving you. And we've not really had that. We've had a series of sort of like, and Tracy's been part of that, a series of measures that we were trying to get to, whereas clear sense of what our priorities were. So this year, given that the finances are very tight and we wanted to pre-commit on pay and real living wage, etc., I felt it was really important to say, so with the money, once you've netted that off, and obviously if we are in an overspend position at year end, we might have to fund that back, etc. So I wanted to be really clear about these are the areas that we would like you to deliver next year, and there are 4 strategic objectives in there. One is to take the action to deliver the reset, which I think goes back to Chair's question about funding your strategic change. The second is to look at the implementation of inquiry reports and improve patient safety and quality, and that's the second. The third is to continue the work we've done this year with our system financial management group to get efficiency, so we're not wasting a single penny, looking at every line and doing that, and we've had a lot of success this year that we intend to carry on in terms of efficiency. And then the last bit was, with the money that we have for routine services, how do we get more productivity, and what are the kind of key areas of focus. So I personally felt that without that, we had this slightly abstract conversation with our trusts about we haven't got enough money, but to do what? You know, and so setting out our priorities, which include things commitment to. We can't fund every. I have to tell you now, and you probably get me back at some point to answer to this, but you know, we have a lot of strategies that had. If you look at the mental health strategy when it was written, there was an assumption that there would be £1.2 billion of additional expenditure over a 10-year period to support the implementation of that. Well, in the current financial situation, we can't. So what we've done is said, of the mental health strategy, what are the aspects that we want to see in this next year, and what would we have to fund in future? Being a bit clear about what our promise is, and that's set out in the guidance. And as it happens, that's the Regional Mental Health Crisis Service and Workforce Planning are the 2 big areas that we want to focus on, and that's what we signal as priorities. So, you know, it's a tough thing to do, because effectively you're saying this is what we're going to do with the money we've got, but it's the right thing to do, because we are, we're trying to be transparent and realistic about what we can do and how quickly we can do things.
Yeah, and I think that's really important, and I welcome that very much so. We've spoken in many debates and motions in the Assembly chamber where we just have never seen priorities. And if you don't have priorities, then you're just wading through mud constantly with no direction on where you're going.
And the risk has been that a lot of the parliamentary committees have come out with things that they want us to do more of. And I'd love to be able to do more of them. But when you add it all up, and I mean, interesting, the one that you most recently published on palliative care, I think was a really helpful one, because actually that was a very good illustration of you could spend the money you've got better. But, if we look at what the ask is maybe around improving GP access, we're going to have to manage the money there. There's a few areas where particular interest groups would like us to spend more money on them, and I'd love to be able to do them all.
Yeah, of course, as would everyone, but that's why transformation is key to it, and that leads me to my next question, is we have in Alliance always advocated for transformation and not been afraid of any difficult decisions that need to take place across the entirety of the health service. But that transformation, or what is it, shift left neighbourhood model, it's not new, and it has been around for years, and you have talked some time about this committee in common. So I want to ask again, what has changed now, as in, can you give examples where we can have good faith that this is going to be the way forward? Are there tangible examples where that committee is making changes already?
Okay, so I'll give you an example that where the committee, so their next agenda, one of the items, which is a long-standing item, is the distribution of psychiatry across Northern Ireland, and we have a lot more services in some part than the others, and the committee in common is coming to. And the committee in common is looking at the distribution of psychiatry and how do we make sure that we can get an even spread of our psychiatrists, looking at things, for example, where post-qualification we might try and put some stipulation in about where people practice for a short period of time in return for, so in order that we can direct that. Now that's a conversation that has to be had by the committee in common, because obviously you've got some people with adequate services or best services, and so the committee in common is starting to example of we'll report back.
That would be good if we could be kept updated on final quick question without looking at a recruitment months or prior to the delivery care where workers, was there a campaign to actually get more people to carry out the service?
Not to my knowledge, Nuala. The reality is it's a constant, such are the recruitment and retention challenges in the sector, which back to the Chair's question earlier, which I noted down, which I didn't get to. Are there challenges in the workforce? Yes, there are, but it's at all times during the year, and again reflective of pay, terms, conditions, all that, well-known problems. So it never really stops, and I know the trusts are constantly at it in terms of their own in-house provision, and certainly some of the larger independent providers have dedicated and very focused recruitment machinery within their own organisations to keep going at it. So, but there wasn't a dedicated campaign as such, because it's just so prevalent throughout the year.
And from personal family knowledge, that is the case. It's like an open recruitment for a number of the larger providers. So it is all year, because it might ramp up in the winter. It certainly continues throughout the summer, and that constant need to continue to support their staff.
But it sounds like something that could be and should be coordinated in terms of who's actually doing it best, the attraction, whether it's through apprenticeships or model like that or anything else.
And do assure you that broader work. So we know we have talked about pay, but the real living wage, when it comes, won't fix it in itself. It is about the broader package around. So career progression, qualifications, job security, feeling valued, all that, and we have a social care workforce strategy that we're taking forward, things like that. It's a key part of the collaborative forum as well. It's just a bit of a longer term, although, you know, I said earlier, NISC sit around the table, so NISC and our social work colleagues have put the care and practice framework in place, which is already a place that people can see a career within social care. So it's the complete package really needs to happen, and we're taking forward that work.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. So just to alert, we've only got through half the members, so we've another half to get through.
We'll keep
so
our answers short, so sorry.
If we can keep the questions a wee bit conciser and answers a bit conciser, because we have another important presentation afterwards. Dan.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation. In many ways, this session has given me hope. In the midst of a dark day, I think, for patients and people waiting in terms of time scales and so on. And I do think that we are looking at some of the right things to make changes, although I suspect those changes will only happen over a very, very long time. I want to ask just a few questions around. So you talk very much about shift left, about a neighbourhood model, etc., etc. Have you actually, in talking to the trusts about their budgets for next year, and I know you haven't got a budget as such, but I know you'll have had preliminary discussions, indicated to them how much or what percentage of their budget they should leave aside to make that shift? Because if we don't, and I realise it has to be incremental, but if we don't do it and we don't make some stipulation around it, it won't happen.
Yeah. So what we are saying is an ambition rather than a target particularly, but the ambition I think is going to be followed through very strongly, is to look for a 2% shift of that. And this is money that would probably still go through the trust bank balance, but actually we would be looking for them to move services, whether that's the diagnostic, what would have been outpatient with a hospital treatment, into they're providing physician support for GPs for advice and guidance. A very good example, I was with the cardiologists from the Southern Trust last week, and we were talking about why is cardiology a hospital-based service, because if you look at some of the best services in the world, cardiology sits alongside general practice. Cardiovascular problems, primary and secondary prevention, can be managed in a community providing you have some in-reach into hospital. So our ambition is to auditably, as in to be able to track it and come along here and say this is what we moved. Now that 2% could be anything, depending on, do we exclude tertiary services, which you wouldn't expect to go into a community setting. That could be around 100 to 150 million pounds of opportunity of spending that money in a community setting to support the neighbourhoods. The other thing we're doing is we're looking for additional funding from social finance. We're talking to Matt Millen about supporting something that could be 10 to 12 million around end-of-life care. We're talking to companies about doing something around the wraparound for GLP-2 drugs around managing obesity, because we know you have to put the lifestyle support in around that. That could be worth £7 million. There's a number of transformation fund projects around young people and families. Again, I can't really announce those, but I can say they're in advanced stages where we are hopeful, one of which adds up to around 60 million for young people, for children, young people and families, that would be actually focused through that neighbourhood model. So we're really trying to get as much resource we can to try, if you like, to do this, fix this problem whilst we're still managing our hospital care. So those are the areas that we've got.
Right, so two questions that lead on from that. Different trusts in Northern Ireland have different budgets. Yeah. How do you make sure that there's some equity of and level of care, in terms of the level of care across Northern Ireland, that will be delivered in the future? And I think that is very important. And how do you make sure that trusts actually don't add in things that they're already doing and call them neighbourhood care?
Well, look,
forgive me for being cynical, but I've been around politics a long time.
If you're in, and again this goes back to that, this kind of idea wasn't present when Ben Gore reported. We didn't have that sort of like commitment to do this in the way that we do now. if I look at the way in which we intend to support these neighbourhood teams come into place, and we will be publishing some guidance on this specifically to help our trusts understand how to set these up. There'll be a degree of consistency about what they look like, and what we will do is probably have to go in 3 waves throughout the course of 26-27. I don't know whether you were around at the time when fund holding came in, but one of the things it did very well was initial groups of fund holders, and I actually was the person who signed the abolition of fund holding, actually, so it's not a personal commitment to that way of working, but the point being that as there were waves that got support, and then they were able to inform the next wave that came along, and then the next wave, and if we went in 3 waves, effectively our starting group would be the better ones, you know, the ones who are most ready, and then they would be able to pass on what they're doing to the next group and the next group. So we're kind of in building this sharing of practice as the sort of like rollout of neighbourhood teams comes into play. That's very different to what we did with the MDTs, which were very clearly 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. This is getting everybody there, but learning as they go. So we are mindful, and it's a good point, that if you are in, you know, the Western Trust, and you've got a big rural area, it might look very different to if you're in Belfast, but there's no reason why we can't have a real consistency of opportunity for those neighbourhood teams to learn from each other and to reduce, I say reduce because I don't think you'll ever eradicate the variability of what they are bringing out. And in some cases, we might want to experiment with some. We might want to particularly say, we're really interested in the development of that service and see if that could work in a neighbourhood situation, but we'll do that in a way that if we do get that, we learn from that very quickly because of that process of sharing and transfer of information.
I think that that's a really good aspiration, and I'd really like to see how that works in practice, and I hope that we'll start to see some of that next year, because I do think that the rollout of the MDT model has left inequalities in the system that will persist for a very, very long time. And if you haven't, or you're not getting some MDT help in this tranche of funding, it's going to be 20, 30 something before you're actually going to get to the next stage. And I just don't want that kind of inbuilt inequality that to happen again.
And look, that's a point really well made, and we signal as part of our commitment on these priorities for the coming period, these first year and then the next 2 years, that eradicating inequality is one of our key overarching aims. So look, it's not easy. We know that. I mean, we've talked a good game on inequalities for a long time and never delivered. In fact, they've widened. So, you know, but again, I'd come back. I'd be very happy to come back to the committee and report on how this is rolling out, and are we seeing that kind of problem and what we would do to fix it. So, you know, look, I'll come back. We'll talk about it as it gets rolled out.
So you mentioned at the very start of your presentation that one of the ways of sorting out, you know, crowded A&Es and so on was to have earlier interventions, you know, at a much, much earlier stage. And that includes the increase in diagnostic interventions, etc. I was just interested because West Streeting yesterday on World Cancer Day issued a plan for cancer for England, in which he said that there would be earlier diagnostic tests, and that by, what was it, 2029, that they would actually meet all of the targets in relation to cancer. Now, we have never met them here, and I think that there is a moral issue over the way that we treat cancer patients in Northern Ireland. We have the longest and worst waiting lists, and we have some of the worst outcomes because we're not in the diagnostic space at a much, much earlier stage. So he is actually advocating for a specific cancer plan. Are we going to do that here? Because I think we're at that stage. We need that.
So I mean, obviously, we do have an approach collective, which Tracy can comment on. I mean, there is some better news on cancer, nowhere near, but we are approaching, we're getting closer to meeting those targets than we've been in a number of areas. And, you know, we want specifically next year to target some of those, and cancer is one of our priority areas. I mean, I am slightly hesitant to sort of follow West Streeting, because actually that cancer plan delays some of the things that they said previously they would do before then, so it's worth having a look at the detail of that. But the one thing that I think we are trying to do, which I think would revolutionise, is to look at genomics and profiling, because the risk that you can identify very quickly now, cancer, and although it will lead to more people needing treatment, it would lead to better people better outcomes for people, because we will get earlier stage presentation, and cancer then becomes a chronic disease rather than acute fatal disease. So I think that's where I think we have to put our energy, and maybe not for today because of the time constraint, but we're working now with Queen's and Ulster on an academic health partnership, which will, I believe, attract more research, more income into Northern Ireland for those kind of new technologies. And I'm really thrilled about the progress we're making there, and I think, you know, you would be able to see that we have a commitment that we could make, which is at least in parallel, if not superior to what the one that England is committing to in that space, because we have two brilliant universities, and I think we have a size where commercial companies with cancer breakthrough drugs, with cancer breakthrough technology, would want to come to Northern Ireland if we could show we've got a joined-up offer. And Belfast Trust, who you're going to talk to, I don't know whether you'll ask them about this, but, you know, some of their research opportunity is really very strong.
Yeah, well, I'll leave that one there, because I do think it deserves a separate probably session in the committee at some stage as well. In relation to, you talked about the financial recovery of the department, and that you were talking to, I'm presuming, Treasury or Health in London, in order to try and get that recovery over a 3-year period. Yeah. How hopeful are you?
Well, I'm very hopeful that that case is understood. And certainly within Northern Ireland there is a lot of interest in pursuing that. Some of that will be Northern Ireland's ability to manage the reprofiling of spend within its overall allocations to each department. So I don't think they could unilaterally say to us, yes, we can do that, without there is some compensatory effects. But crucially, the importance is the conversation with HM Treasury about, do they recognise the situation that we're in and our responsibility, and how quickly we could get out of that. They push hard on, are you transforming your service? The argument that I'm feeding in to our finance colleagues to feed into their conversation is, if you're keen on us transforming, then reprofiling allows us to transform much faster. Yes. So I think the case is very strong, and we continue to make it. At permanent secretary level, I feel that I have a very, very fair hearing, and we've had some bilaterals over recent weeks, as of all government departments, with Minister for Finance, and those have been very positive, at least in terms of understanding the importance of reprofiling.
That's well, it's good to hear that that work is ongoing, because in trying to work out what the issues would be, it would be quite grave if that were not to be the case, and would be important. The winter pressure plan. There was some really good nuggets in the winter pressure plan, but not a lot of scale in relation to it. But one of the things that interested me was the project that you said was in 6 care homes in East Antrim, where you were going in and working much more intensively with those care homes to try to keep those patients out of hospital. Is there any evaluation of that, feedback of that? Because it seems to me that that's a really important element of keeping people out of hospital?
The interim chief exec and I actually were only discussing that a couple of days ago. That's after the end of this month. We'll go into full evaluation as to what that actually delivered compared to the rest of the population. So we want to really look at that as to see whether it's scaled. So it's only in one location at the moment.
Yes.
And they chose the location. They thought they had the right space and the right staff and everything to do it, but I haven't the evaluation yet. It's just not right time. I think we need to let the trust continue through this month. End of this month we're going to start pulling that together, but we've had a lot of conversation because if it's working we need to do more of it. If it's not working, it either needs to be adjusted, adapted, or something else tried. But I think when you look at that and you look at some of the supports even our ambulance service colleagues have had in maintaining people in their care home, because it's not always pleasant for someone to come and to wait in the back of an ambulance to do that. If we are able to, with our GPs, the proactive care, with our community pharmacists helping in that support, with ambulance service helping in that support, with the trust colleagues helping that, and our independent sector working, well, that's a better outcome, mostly. Sometimes it'll be unavoidable, but we will be looking at that as something to see whether it worked, did it work well, and is it something that's more scalable.
And I presume that the delivery of that will really depend on the outcome of your negotiations with GPs in order to actually deliver that service within the community at a much wider scale.
Yeah. Well, our GPs are working really hard, and that was the question from one of the other members earlier. They have been working really hard on that proactive element of the care planning piece, and that's a vital part of that. And indeed, we have increased the amount of spend even since I was with you in November, that was the right time. And, you know, to their credit, despite all of the other negotiations ongoing, that work for the patients on the ground has continued. But it needs a decent evaluation. I don't mean a long one. I'm not a fan of spending 6 months thinking about it. We'll have to look at it and see what objective evidence we have as to whether that improved and maintained people more in their own home where appropriate. Where appropriate.
Okay,
thank you.
We're going to have to move on, but before we do, we just need to take a wee short break. There's a technical issue with their output that we need to take about 1 minute just to pause, just to fix. I think the sound. Go ahead. Okay, apologies for that. We're back in action. Linda?
Thank you, and you'll be glad to hear that most of my questions have been asked and answered, but I have a couple. Just, Peter, you said about the living wage, if and when that's going to be implemented. We're a bit concerned to hear the if, just being honest, because we were given some assurances around that, and I think conversations with the independent sector and getting them back around the table will be pretty difficult if that's not something that's going to be addressed, particularly given that the decision not to do it was based on the incorrect information, going by what the Minister initially told us in the Chamber. So I would just like to get a wee sense of that, if possible. I also would like to know if any further work has been done around direct payments, because it's something I've raised continuously. I'm not sure that it is a massive piece of work, but everybody seems to be talking about it like it's something that'll have to happen away down the line, and that doesn't fill me with any confidence. It's been implemented in different ways in different trusts, and it's not good enough. And I have concern for all families who are relying on that, relying on direct payments for the care of their loved ones. But I particularly have concern for families who have loved ones, and that's children and older people who have life-limiting conditions, because they are spending their last potentially months and weeks and short period of time with the people they love, fighting for the care that they need. And I'm going to a wake today of a child, and that's what her parents spent the last year probably, fighting for the hours that child needs.
Yeah.
That's not fair.
Yeah.
So I do want to get an understanding. It's not one case, and I'm not doing that to be emotive. I'm just trying to make the point that it isn't. This has massive implications when we don't deal with issues like direct payments and how it's implemented. And that was around that issue of needs nursing care, only allowing for so many hours of nursing care, and then saying the rest is social, but not allowing you to use the direct payments for social because the child needs nursing care. That just doesn't make sense. In my view, that's just cruel. And we could end up in legal challenges around this stuff, which does not benefit anybody. So just want to get an understanding of those two issues. There are lots of other things, but I think everybody else, to be fair, has touched on them, and we're not going to gain anything from going into them any deeper today.
Okay.
I certainly would like to ask further questions around the flow at some point, but the Permanent Secretary has said you're happy to come back to us, and around the committees in common, and what services we can provide differently. And if that means regionally, is better, as long as everybody can access the service. That's all I've ever asked, is that everybody can access the service no matter where you live, and that you don't have challenges to access the service. But you particularly mentioned psychiatry, and I know there are massive challenges within my trust, or one of my trusts, I straddle to, the Southern Trust, and they've raised this with SPPG, and they've said that we're really struggling here, and we need help. So if that means that some services, particularly acute, have to be regional, people need the best service. They need what's going to keep them out of the acute settings. They need what's going to give them the best support, and then the trust can commission for what can be actually delivered in what we call the neighbourhood model.
Yeah. If I deal with those first two issues, Linda, when I said earlier about real living wage, the Minister is absolutely committed to it, and as Mike said, it is, when you see the planning guidance, it's there as one of the pre-commitments we're asking the Trust to consider alongside the HSC pay. But when I say if and when, it's because we don't have a budget in the context that we can't give a date for that. But it's not a case. The Minister is fully committed to it, and we are fully reflecting that in what we're asking Trust to plan on the basis of. But it's just not possible to say when at this point. And again, the case for it is well made in the document that we will publish at the start of next week. In terms of direct payments, or indeed self-directed support more widely, because there's managed budgets and things like that as well. When we talked earlier, or Mike talked earlier, around focusing on a number of key priorities for some of our key strategies. Well, in terms of reforming adult social care, promoting and increasing self-directed support is one of our key priorities, because we recognise that we get this right and we do it properly, it is a game changer in terms of the system working better and again delivering better outcomes for people who need to use it. So there is some work ongoing at the moment, maybe within SPPG. The Collaborative Forum took a presentation recently in relation to the work that's ongoing in that regard.
Just to interject, you don't have to give me all the detail today. I'm happy to have that in a written form, because I am conscious that other members might have questions.
We can do that. So I give you that assurance. We are seized of the importance of STS and its importance in the system and in the system of reform, and that's why you'll see it as one of the four sort of key priorities that we want to focus on. We will be issuing a broader reform around adult social care, because again, it's not just about these, but mindful of what Mike said earlier, we're trying to focus in on a small number of key priorities. That's one of them.
Just that regional approach potentially.
Yeah. So look,
you gave psychiatry as an example. And
yeah,
it's grand to say, well, you have
there are some areas where the solution is that we should have a regional service. It's a 1.9 million population. Travel distances are difficult, but you can manage transport if you believe that the service is properly located at the right place. And this comes back to this question that we've teased all afternoon about variability and consistency and having a regional service. What we've got to do is get the right service at the right level. There are some services we're probably trying to do regionally that really could be more accessible locally, and everybody always fears centralisation in health services because it means you travel further. But when you look, a lot of things are decentralised as well. 20, 30 years ago, if you wanted MRI scanning, you probably had to go to a specialist centre. Now MRIs are available. So these things ebb and flow, and what we've got to do is get the right things. I think things like psychiatry is not necessarily about having a regional centre for things. It's about thinking, how do you get the deployment of psychiatry to parts of Northern Ireland that are under-provided for, and can we link the opportunity? It's not that, getting psychiatrists is quite hard at the moment, but actually could we do something at our universities to create academic roles and posts that really attract them? Because once you attract a big hitting psychiatrist, you get a lot of people who want to follow. So we're just looking at everything we can, but a regional approach doesn't always mean it ends up with a regional service. And what we're keen to do is work as one system, and that's really evident in the way that we're working now.
Appreciate that. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Linda. Al?
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Mike, Tracy and Peter. I just want to take us back to the independent care meeting that we had about a week or two ago. And it was a very interesting meeting. Some of the issues that they brought to us were quite stark as well. One of the providers that we had before us had indicated that, and this was their figures, that 73% of their staff who are leaving are not returning to the sector altogether. They also said that some of their staff are having to go to food banks, and the term they used as well, that staff be totally devalued. Now, obviously they have been told that the real living wage will be paid whenever it's affordable. I suppose the question is, when will it be affordable, given the financial challenges that the health department faces?
Let me come back to, I think, what Pete said a moment ago, which is that what we're trying to do when we get our budget clear, and this is in the planning guidance, you can see that real living wage is there alongside HSE pay, is to say these are our priorities. So our pre-commitments into next year, given what we have said this year will be, to make pay our top priority, and we are seeing real living wage in parallel to paying HSE staff in terms of that. We were able last year to meet, as we have to, by the national living wage, and we want to do this. We strategically, it comes back to, I think, the Chair's initial question, strategically it makes sense to create the capability of this sector in the flow of patients to have the level of capacity it needs. So I'll repeat, if we are, once we have a budget, this is a first call, pay is a first call in the sense of what we would be spending our money on next year. And obviously we will be looking to do that at the earliest. I think the Minister's phrase is at the earliest possible opportunity, and that's what we are committed to do.
We do hope that happens. Just the other issue, Peter, and I think Danny was trying to tease that out. The trusted assessor model, which again the independent sector spoke highly of, and obviously currently it is a Monday to Friday arrangement, 9 to 5. I don't think you definitively answered, Danny, when do you expect that to be a 24/7 service across all trusts?
So I don't have a definitive date, Alan. What I can say is the work and the preparatory work to get to an agreed position to allow that to happen has been taking place and will come to a conclusion. It will then be for trusts working with the independent sector to deliver against that agreed model and governance structure as well. So I don't want to underestimate the work that's taken to get to this point, because it's right and proper that time has been spent to get to the right model, because if we get the right model, then it's a case of all shoulders to the wheel to make sure that model's implemented. So I think it's there. We know it's a really important mechanism and flow, and I know Tracy and our colleagues will be looking to work with the trusts over the course of the year to make sure that happens as quickly as possible, because we now know what we're working towards, whereas in the past, again, it was this mismatch of different approaches.
And I suppose it's like a lot of the things that we're doing, that 7-day working piece, is actually critical. We want to make sure that things can continue over the weekend period, but that is challenging, and often it is capacity and the right people at the right place. But on trusted assessors, I think that's one. Certainly it's high, but it has no funding source at this moment to push it into that space, so we'll have to continue, but it is a priority for us.
Can I just ask maybe a final question? This is not a gotcha question, it's not an inflammatory type question, but in terms of flow, those trusts that are underperforming in terms of flow, are they held accountable?
Yeah.
They are? What are
they? So we have a framework which is called support and intervention. I think it's really important that no one fails on purpose, right? And I would argue that in the past there's been a bit of a culture within health of holding people to account by effectively shouting at them without having any sense of what the solution is. And so one of the things that we have to do is to be clear about where we have underperformers in the sense of what the trust would aspire to provide and what we set as standards. We have a support intervention framework that takes people up the levels, and we know one of our trusts is at the highest level for some of the things, and through those processes. But we have to have an answer ourselves as to what we would do about it. It's no good just. It's a bit like someone speaking a foreign language and you're just shouting louder in English. We need to join them at the hips in terms of, so what is the solution? And sometimes the solution is looking at another trust and what they're doing. And so we would be encouraging those. And sometimes it's actually providing evidence from elsewhere or giving them additional support to be able to sort of manage and then to sort of like become self-reliant after that. So the performance management and accountability framework is very clear. It's support and intervention, and the consequence really is that we know boards are accountable for doing things, and ultimately if in the appraisal process that we have there are questions of individual capacity or capability, we'd expect them to be dealt with in the proper way.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. So, thank you very much. That went way beyond time, but I think it was important that we got the opportunity to ask all the questions we did. So, thank you very much for coming. Can I just say, before we go, in terms of this conversation, but our overall health service, it would be important that the GP issue is resolved. I'm glad to hear that they're back into negotiations with yourselves. Primary care GP access is a major issue, and I don't think it's good for any patient outcome that GPs are at odds with the department. So I wish everybody good luck, and hopefully we can have a good outcome in terms of that negotiation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, members, just before we go to the Belfast Trust, I want to move to the item number 10 on our agenda quickly, which is the SL1 on Health and Social Care Pension Scheme. Member Contributions Regulations 2026. Can I refer members to tab 10 of our main pack? That includes the memo from the clerk at page 93 the SL1 at page 95 and the proposed SR and explanatory memorandum. We've received no responses to the call for views on the proposed rules, so I'm just going to ask if members have any comments to make in relation to it. None? Okay. Can I ask if we're content with the statutory rule? Okay, so I just have to advise that the detail relating to the new SL1 scrutiny process has been included at page 108 to 111 of the pack for members' information, and that includes a flow chart outlining the new process. So we're all content with that SL. Thank you. Okay, members, moving back then to the oral briefing from the Belfast Trust in terms of trust overview. Can I refer members to papers at page 31 of the main pack? And can I belatedly welcome Jennifer Welch, Chief Executive, Belfast Health and Social Care Trust, Mr Alan Campbell, Director of Performance, Ms Paula Callahan, Director of Child Health, and Ms Kerry Lee Weatherall. So you're all very welcome. Apologies for that previous session went on longer, but it was very important. So I'm sure some of the aspects in that we'll cover in this one. So you've sent us some information. I'm going to hand over yourselves just for some brief introductory remarks, and then we'll take questions.
Okay, well, good afternoon, Chair and committee members, and thank you for inviting us to be here with you this afternoon. And as was reflected earlier on from Betty Carlisle, it is good to meet out in the community where the majority of Belfast Trust care actually happens, out in our community. And given that we are meeting in a women's centre, I've asked two director colleagues to join me whose area of work concerns either women's health or that of our family. So Paula Callahan, and Paula's portfolio of responsibility includes child health, maternity, gynae and sexual health services, and Kerry Lee Weatherall, and Kerry Lee is the Interim Executive Director of Social Work and Director of Children's Community Services, and then alongside them is Alistair Campbell, Director of Performance Planning and Informatics in the Trust. So between the four of us, and in addition to the paper that we submitted, we hope to be in a position just to provide you with a flavour of the overarching work of the Trust, the progress we're making and where the challenges are. In terms of my opening comments, I'm going to theme these across what we call the 5 Ps. So our patients and service users, our population health and partners, our people, in other words our staff, our performance and our potential. So thinking about our patients and service users first of all, and looking at population health and partners, you all know that Belfast Trust is the biggest trust in Northern Ireland, and we deliver the majority of the regional specialties as well as providing local care to the people of Belfast, and that's described in our paper as Belfast's dual personality. Given the range and the reach of the services, the Trust's patients and our service users are very eclectic, and I've provided you with some high-level data that outlines in broad terms the health of the population of Belfast. While life expectancy varies across the city, it is lowest in the most deprived areas, and overall it is the lowest in Northern Ireland. Belfast also has the highest levels of social and economic deprivation. We have more people facing health inequalities and more people, in particular women, living with long-term health conditions. In Belfast there are high rates of cardiovascular disease, respiratory illnesses and mental health conditions. And hand in hand with these statistics, we put into our paper some information on the scale of the challenges facing a Belfast child, which I'm sure members have found sobering. For example, you'll see that the number of looked after children in the Trust area accounts for more than a quarter of the entire number of looked after children across Northern Ireland. And as a Trust, we partner with the Belfast Area Outcomes Group to support children to realise their full potential and to help families deliver the best possible outcomes for their children. I'm also pleased to tell you that our health visiting team has been designated a UNICEF Gold Baby Friendly service for excellent and sustained infant feeding support and parent-infant relationships. And I know I don't need to tell you how important a good start is to the development of a child. Members will also understand how crucial it is that health and social care through the neighbourhood model that the Permanent Secretary referred to earlier, but particularly here in Belfast, really prioritises community services. and that we work in partnership with the community and voluntary sector, like colleagues here in the Shared Women's Centre, to support, stabilise, to innovate, and ultimately to deliver community services that make people's lives better. We've engaged with the Shankill Shared Women's Centre for many years, and we've indirectly supported programmes through things like the Active Belfast Partnership. One of our team members is based in the Greater Shankill Partnership, and she chairs the Greater Shankill Health Forum, and the Shankill Shared Women's Centre are a partner in that. They're also a core member of the Shankill Family Support Hub and our Neighbourhood Renewal, where we also have a presence. We've also received Peace Plus funding towards targeting mental health services in the whole area of health inequalities, conflict and high mediation, and so on. And the Shankill Women's Centre has also been invited to participate with funding for an upcoming women's event on International Women's Day on the 8th of March. So we're always working to deliver more care in partnership and more care in our communities, particularly care that once would have been considered hospital care, a conversation that you had earlier on. So we have a glaucoma clinic that we provide down the road in the Shankill Wellbeing and Treatment Centre. That's a great example of something that used to be provided in a hospital. It's now out in the community and receives really excellent feedback from our patients. Moving on to our people, I'm incredibly proud of colleagues in the Trust who deliver care under extraordinarily challenging circumstances, reflective of the population that we serve. The 22,000 people that we employ come from right across Northern Ireland. I also, of course, want to acknowledge, as I have done with you before, this past year has been particularly turbulent for Belfast Trust, for staff, for patients, for service users and for families. There's been much hurt and anxiety. We've had intense scrutiny and pressure and many issues that need addressed and confidence that needs restored. We have openly seized that opportunity and we have pushed ahead with change. The recommendations arising from the Hill-McBride report have been helpful in signposting a way forward, and I'm very pleased to report that further to my previous attendance here at committee back at the end of October, we have a well-established and well-supported programme, and we're continuing at pace across a number of areas. We have a newly established culture and governance group which provides oversight to all that we're doing in that area. It is currently led by Patricia Gordon, the acting chair of the Trust, and I anticipate that our new chair will take that on. We have 4 pillars on work streams, one specific to cardiac surgery, one specific to people and culture, one around governance and assurance, and one on medical leadership. These 4 work streams are values-led, and that's core to everything that we do in the Trust, and they're reaching down through the organisation. And I'm steadfast in my commitment to building a safe and supportive workplace and to rebuilding trust with colleagues, with our trade unions and with the public. I want to assure you these work streams are not talking shops. I and my Trust Board and the Executive Team colleagues, we are held to account, and rightly so, by the Department of Health and the Minister, who alongside our own staff want to see sustained progress. And I really look forward to building the confidence of the Department to demonstrate that we are making sustained progress, to then enable the Trust to be de-escalated from level 5 of the support and intervention framework. In terms of performance, as members will know, the last few years have been a particularly challenging period for health and social care, and you reflected on that in some of your earlier session. Our teams have weathered the pandemic. In Encompass, we've introduced a transformational new system that requires all of our staff to work in a completely new way, and demand has increased in line with demographic projections. So we continue to deal with the twin problems of unacceptably long waiting times for planned care and the extreme pressures in our urgent and emergency services and in our community services. But it is really important for members to know that despite this, our teams are delivering more care than ever before. So whenever we compare the recent 4-month period with the same 4-month period last year, and actually the same period pre-pandemic, we're now delivering approximately 10,000 more inpatient and day case treatments, and we've delivered approximately 20,000 more outpatient appointments. And that's not including the additional non-recurrent funding that the Executive has made available to target waiting times. Our teams have also been putting on additional clinics, running mega clinics, and carrying out clinical and administration validation of waiting lists to ensure that we're having the maximum impact. It goes without saying our waiting lists are still far too long, and you will have seen that all trusts are struggling, but we are definitely seeing a long-term trend of reductions in our total waiting lists. Across our unscheduled care services, we continue to experience intense pressure, and it does remain a very challenging environment for our staff, but of course particularly for patients. On top of our role as the District General Hospitals for Belfast, we are also the major trauma centre for all of Northern Ireland, and we have seen increased demand and increased attendances in both populations. On an average day, we operate at approximately 100 beds above our funded capacity. And while that's particularly intense over the winter period, it is a year-long challenge. However, in spite of the pressures, our teams have made improvements in reducing the number of patients who are waiting more than 12 hours for admission, reducing the overall length of stay for patients requiring simple and complex discharge, enhancing the number of services that provide either direct admission or planned urgent care that therefore doesn't require attendance at the emergency department. We've reduced ambulance handover delays, and we have introduced new services like our psychiatric assessment and treatment hub, some of you have visited that at the Mater. In the community, we're also facing real challenges, and as we heard earlier, we have many people who are fit for discharge every day, but whose onward care is delayed, and therefore they remain in a hospital bed. And we know this is not what patient wants. It puts additional pressure on our hospitals, and it restricts that good flow through the system. In terms of onward care into the community, adequate nursing home capacity, and specifically the right kind of nursing capacity, particularly in things like dementia care and complex behaviours, is a real challenge for us. But in spite of those challenges, we are making sustained improvements in complex discharges for older people and for the under 65s with complex needs. So just to give you an example, in 2024, on an average day, we would see 20 to 25 people with complex needs discharged from our acute hospitals, and maybe up to 40 on a good day. But at the end of 2025, and as a result of unrelenting focus in that area from our hospital social work teams, we are now able to discharge on average 40, which was previously a good day, and now a good day for us is up to 60 complex discharges. So we are making good progress. We've also established new pathways that help us to keep people better cared for at home, and therefore can avoid coming into hospital, and that's particularly important for the frail elderly and for those at the end of life. Some of the examples that you'll be aware of are our Hospital at Home programme, our Community Falls team, and the Community Palliative Care Hub. And we're about to begin a number of pilot schemes which we hope will make a big difference to how we care for elderly people outside of hospital. And these pilots include how the Trust can enhance care in care homes, how we can schedule preventative home visits for the over 65s, and we're going to reconfigure all of our care of the elderly wards, which are dispersed across our hospitals, to a single unit on the City Hospital site with a direct assessment unit and a community referral service. Much of what I have said so far confirms the potential to transform our services. So these are not just a pipe dream, this is a reality that we are actually transforming services, and one that staff are really up for. Staff have shown that given empowerment and a safe space, they have the ability and the wherewithal to make the changes that are positive for patients and service users. Digitally, there are real opportunities to continue to transform our services. We've got Encompass, NIPACs, LIMS. All of these provide a really strong digital foundation, and we'll continue to find new ways to use them to improve our services. The MyCare app in particular offers the possibility of creating a new way of communicating with patients, which could offer huge benefits in the future and should help empower patients to own their life's journey within the health service. And touching on what the Permanent Secretary mentioned earlier on, we have strong relationships with our two local universities, and we are key players in two of the current City Deal projects. We're working in partnership with Ulster University on the development of the new Centre for Digital Health Technology, and we've partnered with Queen's to develop a clinical research innovation centre called iReach Health, which will sit on the City Hospital side. These are two hugely exciting projects that will, without doubt, deliver cutting-edge research that will benefit the population and the Northern Ireland economy. And keeping with buildings, and to conclude, I know that issues within the Trust capital builds have exercised us all for some time now. I'm pleased to report that the new Children's Hospital continues to progress well on site. I'm aware that there will be an impact on the cost and the programme of the building as a result of the lessons learned from the maternity hospital, as well as changes to the latest guidance. In terms of the acute mental health inpatient centre and the maternity hospital, as previously reported to members, we have agreed a way forward for remediation works to both buildings. Design teams have been appointed for both sets of work, and design work has begun. And I anticipate that I will have updated costs and a more detailed programme of work for both buildings, and I'll be happy to keep you across that at a later date. For now, though, we'd hope to discuss the broad areas of interest across the Belfast Trust within the vast and diverse services that we deliver, but of course we'll be happy to take any questions that you might have. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. That was a pretty extensive overview. And can I start by just commending you and your staff for all the good work that you do, and you've certainly indicated some really positive good work carried out by staff of the Belfast Trust, particularly engagement with the community, and you've also outlined some of the I suppose, impacts of living in a big city with socially deprived areas, and we take all that on board. Unfortunately, just given time constraints, on occasions like this, we tend to focus on some of the challenges. So I don't want you to think that we're not appreciative of the very good work. I mean, I certainly attended the launch of the Belfast Community Palliative Care Hub in Stormont last week, or a couple of weeks ago, and given the work that the committee has done on palliative care, that was a really positive aspect of healthcare, and we wish that all the success possible. Just when you finished up, very quickly in terms of the capital projects, because you're right, that has exercised this committee a lot over the last year. So you're saying you expect the cost of the Children's Hospital to go up just because of the lessons. Have you any indication of the extent of the rise in cost?
No, I couldn't give a definitive answer on that at this point, but I'll be more than happy to come back whenever we have the detail.
And secondly, we have an update, and you said you'll come back with an update on the maternity and the mental health hospital. We really appreciate that. Have you any indication, just timeframes with regard to both, that you can give us today that might be additional to what we've heard in the past? I mean, we'd really like to get the maternity hospital open and patients and children benefiting from it.
We are looking at how we could phase this. So Paula may want to comment. So there are some aspects of the building that we believe that we could open relatively quickly, and we're currently assessing what services we could potentially move in. So Paula, could I maybe ask you to comment?
Two phases to the work. So there's remediation for the entire building, and then there's focused work about the work that needs to be done in the design of the water system for the augmented care level within neonatal. So the hope is that all of the work for the broader remediation will then mean that parts of the building can be occupied. Now, what we are focusing on is the use of that building for ambulatory level services in the earliest phase of that work, and we're working on risk assessments around that just at the moment. So early pregnancy support, antenatal care, those types of services we hope to be able to deliver out of the building, but we're working with the teams on that at this point.
Any indication of time frame?
Well, we're bound by the scheme of work, so I'm not in the estates and capital design side, I'm in the service delivery end, so apologies, I haven't been given a definitive time frame. We're waiting for the design team, I think, to give the final
give us
call
a final
on
go
that.
ahead. So I wouldn't want to be definitive, Philip. We're just waiting for final details on that.
Okay, and then just very quickly, going back to the previous conversation that we had with the Permanent Secretary, within the Belfast Trust, is there a trusted assessor working 24/7, 7 days a week?
Yes, so we have that in place, and I can't say that it's 24/7, but it's certainly the model that is there, and is part of the reason why we have been able to increase the number of complex discharges that we have. So shifting that from 20-25 a day, 40 on a good day, right up to 60 on a good day now, is all part of the package of works that we've put in place with the trusted assessor, but with the early review scheme in relation to care packages and so on. So there's been a whole range of things in that space that has allowed us to improve there.
Okay, and I mean, you've given some positive figures, but if my figures are correct, the length of stay in Belfast is still the longest across the north. So is there particular challenges in Belfast than compared to other trusts?
So I'll maybe come back to you on that, because I didn't think that the length of stay was necessarily the longest. I think we need to look down at individual specialties. I think it's also important to bear in mind that with that dual personality, we're not just a district general hospital, we're the major trauma centre and with all the regional specialties. So therefore there's a complexity of services that we have, and some of those patients will rightly have a longer length of stay. So I think it's important not to just maybe look at an average. So if we compare general medicine or general surgery with how we're doing in the other trusts, I think we're on a par with that. But
yeah, I think that is definitely right. We also, because we tend to be a trust that takes in patients from elsewhere, generally when you're moving across trust boundaries, I think there's about a 12 to 16 hour addition in the time spent in hospital. Usually it's just due to the complexity of discharge. So because we tend to be an importing trust, we tend to have slightly longer. That's not just an us problem, by the way. For the other trusts, if they're repatriating, they get the same thing. It's just that we have a higher proportion of patients coming from out of area.
So, and Jennifer, you said that you're seeing more patients, you're at more clinics, so you're doing more work, but yet the numbers are going up. Why is that? Why, if you're doing all that work, are we not seeing reductions in numbers?
So we're seeing reductions in the number of decisions to admit, for example. I mean, you'll all be aware of that, the high numbers of decisions to admit that we would see in an emergency department, and that's an indicator of the lack of flow and real pressure in the system. Belfast has done really well in terms of reducing the number of decisions to admit. So whenever I last looked at the app, the Royal was sitting with 25, and it's only a few months ago that would more often have been sitting at 40 or 50 DTAs. So the numbers of people attending ED are going up, the number of discharges are getting better, and we can see the impact because of the reduction in the number of decisions to admit. And as a result of that, we have been able to reduce down some of the escalation beds that we have had up recently. So it's a bit of a complex picture and a constantly moving picture as well, but I'm confident that this is going in the right direction, and looking at the DTAs is one of the snapshot things that you can look at to tell that this is actually moving in the right direction.
The biggest, I think, improvement is the 12-hour waits.
Yeah.
To 12-hour and longer waits have really been a steady downward trajectory for being sustained for the last 12 months, really. So I mean, not saying everything's perfect, there's a long way to go, but we are seeing improvements.
Okay, and you mentioned a number of other issues in terms of reducing ambulance wait. I know others will ask that, so I don't intend to ask questions on that. One of the things that struck me was when you said you want the Belfast Trust, as we all do, to be a safe and supported workplace. So we have a written briefing after this to discuss in terms of violence against staff. I mean, we all would expect the figures for Belfast to be greater than other trusts. They're kind of substantially better. We're talking here from October to December 25, where there's 787 instances of physical abuse and 292 instances of verbal abuse, which is a total of 1,007. So that's a stark figure for your staff to have to put up with in terms of levels of violence. We last week had a visit to Antrim A&E, and you'll obviously be aware of this, Jennifer, from your previous role. But you know, we heard really positive things about the body-worn cameras and the impact that it could potentially have. Not a silver bullet, we understand, but I mean, is that something that Belfast Trust would be working swiftly to implement to add an extra level of safety for the staff?
Absolutely, and we have taken that to our trust board to embark on a consultation in relation to body-worn cameras. What I would also say is at the moment we are required to do that consultation as well. Yeah. I would hope through the committee in common approach and with agreement of the department, if one trust does it, then we should all just get on and do it. That would be my preference. I'd be
interested to hear of any other aspects of policy that you plan to introduce or could introduce just to kind of reduce those figures.
Yeah, so a lot of this is also about awareness in the different emergency departments as well. It is true that whenever services become pressured, it is more likely that you'll have that kind of challenge as well. So some of it is about trying to keep areas calm. The very fact that we're able to reduce down the number of decisions to admit in the emergency department and have them less crowded and have them more calm is some of the things that actually help with tension and a heightened environment. Even the body-worn cameras, I mean, they're only activated whenever required, but what we find is the fact that they're there are a deterrent in themselves. So that is the type of thing. I'm not sure if colleagues want to add to that.
I think our children's homes as well, we do have assaults on staff. However, that's to do with the trauma children are faced with, but we have brought in a therapeutic model that we have actually really seen a reduction in incidents, and it's been wholly embraced across our children's homes. So it's really, really supported how we de-escalate behaviours and we wrap around young people. So we do have policies. We are following the Northern Ireland FITSI model, they call it, therapeutic intervention model, and when we embrace models and approaches like that, we can actually see a big difference in how children respond and how staff respond as well to de-escalation methods. We wouldn't be looking at body cameras or wearing body cameras in children's homes, but there are other ways of doing it as well. So, you know, we do have really positive outcomes in how we've seen a reduction in incidents of aggression and violence towards staff, for example, in our social care.
Okay, and just last question from me. You did provide some update on the McBride Hill report, and that's welcome. Just if I could ask you for your sense of the cardiac unit, where it is in particular, because obviously it was a major cause of concern which led to the introduction of the special level. So if you could give us a bit of an overview where things are at within that unit and when you expect working with the department to reduce the special measures.
So in relation to cardiac, you'll be aware we appointed an interim clinical director, Mr. Peter Bradley, and we were fortunate to have him at our public trust board meeting in January, along with other colleagues from cardiac surgery, because we wanted to present in public forum all of the changes and the improvements that have been made. So Peter and other colleagues had a very thorough presentation, and some of the work that he's progressing with the clinical team, such as moving to a surgeon of the week model, but also effectively creating 3 subspecialty teams. So those are all things that are good progress from a clinical perspective. There's been a huge amount of work in relation to respect and civility training, and a very high percentage of all of the staff have now gone through that programme. There's a detailed newsletter that goes out to the team very regularly, so there's quite a bit of engagement in and around that, and we continue to work very, very closely with that team. So Peter will be with us probably through to at least the end of March. I would hope we can persuade him to stay longer than that, because I think he has been of great benefit to the unit. Somebody who has been through challenges in his own unit and is bringing that experience to us here. Obviously, it is the regional service. There's nowhere else we can compare to in Northern Ireland, so it's important that we're looking outside. So we continue to work very, very closely with that team. The other themes that I mentioned in and around the overarching Hill-McBride report, but reaching back to the DCO cardiac surgery report and other reports and things that I want to take forward in the organisation as well. Some of the other areas, there's one on medical leadership, for example, and some of the things that Hill-McBride had talked about was the tenure of medical leaders and how you get changeover and how the clinical directors have access to the executive team, for example. So we've done quite a bit of work. We've started a new training programme for our clinical directors and senior managers, bringing them together. That was launched in November and has been really, really positive feedback in relation to that. We have also looked at refreshing the cadre of clinical directors and chairs of division, so at the 5-year point. If you've not already been through a re-interview process, that we would do that at that point, just to try and refresh jobs. We are intending on creating a clinical council or a clinical forum. This was something that I was used to having in the Northern Trust, where clinical directors and chairs of division would meet regularly, usually monthly, with the chief executive and the executive team. So that's something that we'll be putting in place. And in relation to governance and assurance, that was looking at really from the trust board down the governance and assurance mechanisms that are in place. We have developed a new assurance framework that we will probably be launching at the beginning of the new financial year in April, so the creation of a number of new formal committees of the Trust Board. So there will be a new Patient and Safety Quality Committee that will replace our Assurance Committee. There will be a new People and Culture Committee. There will be a new Performance and Transformation Committee and a new Performance Management Framework that goes with that. So the whole swathe of things in that regard. And then finally, just a little bit on people and culture. I engaged an external advisor, as was suggested in the report, to do a review of the HR function. That is well underway, and I am anticipating receiving a report and recommendations from that in March. So there's been a huge amount of activity that has gone on really since the end of October.
And that's welcome. I suppose if the public and even ourselves as committee members, is the activity effective in the sense that, you know, what came to light through previous reports was described as shocking, and why wouldn't it be? So I think if we were looking at that unit now, how would you as the Chief Executive describe it?
I suppose I was looking to Peter, the Clinical Director, and he was very clear on the assurances that he was giving us in terms of the safety and the quality of services in that unit. We've been very fortunate that cardiac surgery is always a service that has participated in national benchmarks, and it can stand up there in relation to the safety and the quality of the services that it provides. And we're continuing to support that team in relation to team building type aspects. But in terms of when would people feel a difference in the trust, and I talked whenever I was with you in October, culture change is a long-term game, and I remember saying then this is a 3 to 5 year journey, and I think we focus in on particular areas and give it support where it needs, like cardiac surgery. But a lot of the rest of this is about engagement across the organisation. So even on things like the development of our performance management framework or the development of our corporate plan, a lot of the work is about the engagement that we are having with clinical teams to even develop the framework or develop the strategy, and the same is true around the people and culture as well. So this will change over time, and it will be our staff, I think, who will feel it first. But you know, I think the report has been well received. We as a senior team have accepted it. We've accepted all of the recommendations, and we are moving forward in good faith to build a better Belfast.
Okay, leave it there. Diane?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation. I think it is very important. I want to cover a few issues, so I'll just sort of dive in as best I can. In terms of the maternity hospital, you wrote to me recently with an update on the maternity hospital, which indicated that the required works for the option 2, which is the issue of the neonatal plus the wider works, would take another 28 months. So if we think that the maternity hospital was handed over to the Belfast Trust, I think 2 years ago, this month or next month, certainly we're at the 2 year mark, we are talking about 4.5 years before the hospital can be operational in any way, shape or form, apart from some clinics. I think most people listening to this will find that an incredible situation that we find ourselves in, 4.5 years after. And that's only if everything goes okay, because you also go on to say, should option 2 fail to deliver, then option 3 will require a much more extensive piece of work, and that potentially would delay it even further. Are you sure that option 2, i.e. replacing the pipework in the neonatal unit and flushing the rest of the hospital, will be effective? Because you're currently spending, and I think the last information I got, about 40,000 a month, literally flushing water down the drain in that hospital. And you know, we still know that that water is not safe to drink or use.
So in relation to the options that were put forward, you'll be aware that we in the Trust had commissioned an independent report which proposed option 2 as the solution. Subsequent to that, the Minister then commissioned an independent report which proposed option 2. I believe that option 2 is the right one. I have no reason to believe that it would fail, and I think if that is delivered in the right way, that is the right thing and it will be successful. It's an abundance of caution here, where we are saying that should that fail, we would have to escalate to option 3. And that's the advice that we are getting from those independent reports. But should it have taken this long? Absolutely not. We now have a detailed investigation underway as to how we got into this situation, and it wouldn't be appropriate for me to say anything more on that at this point, but I'm sure I will come back to you in due course.
Yeah, I think most people thinking that 4.5 years until we can potentially use a hospital is really nothing short of a scandal. I know that you will agree with me. If I was to go into the hospital today, is the water safe to drink?
My understanding is that yes, it's safe to drink.
So you're confident that it is safe to drink, and can you then explain why the signs have gone up to say not to drink the water?
So I don't have the Director of Infrastructure here to comment on that. My apologies. We can come back to you on that.
I think we would need to know that, because my understanding is that warnings have been put in place not to drink the water, but it would be great if you could come back and answer that question. During this 2.5-year period, you are obviously going to continue with this flushing of the pipes, or is it all going to be done in one go? What way are we going to
So I suppose because there have been detailed briefings before in relation to the capital infrastructure, and my understanding of today was it was a trust overview to cover a wide range of issues. I'd referred in my opening remarks that I'm happy to come back and do a detailed briefing again around infrastructure. We were hoping to focus on services today. I'm happy to return, Chair, with the Director of Infrastructure, and because I would not be able to answer all of the detail of your question.
It's just that an overview of the trust is also an overview of the buildings and the capital projects that you have ongoing in the trust. And I do think it is poor that, again, we're not getting the full answers and we have to wait again for that. I noticed in one of the Finance Committee reports that the Trust currently has an overspend. Will you be able to balance the books by the end of the financial year?
I think it unlikely that we will balance the books this year. I think it is hugely challenging for all trusts. So at the moment we are projecting a deficit position, and that is known to the department, and we work very closely obviously with the department in relation to this.
Okay, and do you know what that deficit position is? I mean, my information just from gleaning is that there'll potentially be an overspend of 139 million with an overcommitment of 106 million.
We're currently projecting a deficit of about £9 million excluding pay.
Oh, excluding pay. So does the 139?
So the pay wouldn't be totally
139.
No, it wouldn't be as much as that. But the way that we're presenting it, because this is what the department has asked us to do, is what would the deficit position be excluding the pay element.
Okay.
So that's we're
again,
currently
that would
projecting
be an
£9
interesting
million.
one just to come back to. I think it's quite important. You talked about briefly the McBride Hill report, and the last time you were at the committee, and again I said it when the report was being talked about at committee, one of the issues that has been skirted around in the committee is what they all tidied up under the heading of legacy issues. And we're still skirting around them today. I think there's some really encouraging things that have been going on, and I do hope they work out. I think it's for everybody's good that that happens. But we still are not going to deal with these euphemistic legacy issues and so on. And I suppose there's one important question that I do want to ask really about those again, and it comes from a note that you sent me. The investigation that is now going, and the review of this MHPS process is a random sampling of that. But if one of those clinicians wants their case reviewed, will it be included? Can they specifically ask for that? Or does that upset the randomness of the
I did meet with unions to explain this to them. This was the original plan from our chair at the time. It has to be random to give us a sense of how was the scheme running. So was it running as effectively as possible? What are the issues? Was it taking too long? So if we make it
well, it was taking an unearthly amount of time, because some consultants were in this process for years on end. In fact, they'd accumulated about 3 of these by the time one was finished. So we know it wasn't effective and it wasn't efficient. We know that. But I'm trying to ask, if you want your case investigated, can it be investigated?
I think there are processes in place for people who want to revisit, and I don't think this would be the appropriate place for it, the MHPS review, because it's not intended to reopen the files. It's intended to look at how the process was applied to the files. So I think that is looking for
so right, this is slightly different.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. If a consultant or a clinician, whoever it happens to be, wanted to have access to the files, are those files openly available to them?
I actually don't know the answer to that, I'm afraid. I'll need to check with the...
So I'm aware that the files were all archived, and so a sample is having to be retrieved from archives to be able to carry out the exercise that we have just talked about.
But
so they're not...
Without the exercise, so not talking about the exercise. I am X wants to find out what files were kept on them. Is that openly available to them? And has that been openly available to tribunals that have taken place?
Can I check that and come back to you in writing? So I'm responsible for looking after the review, but it's not an area that I look after on a day-to-day basis, so I don't know the detail, I'm afraid, of how accessible they are. So if I take that away, and I'll come back to you.
I think it would be really important to have answers to those, because those are the type of questions I have been asked. And it has been indicated to me that those files have not been openly available and have not even been openly available when there has been a legal process.
I'm sure that we follow the correct legal process, but I need to check what the correct legal process is.
Okay. In terms of waiting lists, so I see that from April to December, the waiting list, the number of people waiting, the waiting list for scopes, for example, has gone down considerably, and that's good news. Particularly the waiting list in terms of those who are waiting 9 and sometimes 50, the one of 52 weeks seems to, from what I can see, if the graph has halved, it is actually it is good news, and that the number overall has come down from just over 2,000 to, I don't know, under 1,500. So that's in April to December. I don't know, there's a reduction of 500-600 in the number of scopes. Has that been due to the elective care process or processes that you've been instigating in the hospital yourselves?
It's a bit of both, actually, on scopes.
Okay.
There's some quite innovative things that have been done in the team around how they manage it, for one thing. So then there's also some quite sort of old-fashioned performance management has gone in, where they've really just honed down on making sure they're making the absolute best use of everything's available, making sure the clinicians are all fully booked, and then there's the additionality they're doing on top of it. So all of those together have really driven it down. So I think it's a really high-performing team, if I'm honest, the endoscopy team. So I think now, as well as that reduction in numbers, we've got the red flag waiting time down, so it's well under 2 weeks now for red flag endoscopies as well. So it's the whole process has been streamlined.
That is good news. There's still, considerable numbers of people waiting.
Yes.
But it is good news that it is going in the right way.
Particularly the red flag.
Yeah.
I think is
But unfortunately, the inpatient.
Move on.
I do think this is important, actually. The inpatient and the new consultant outpatient lists haven't changed in any shape or form.
So there is the data is not quite telling you the whole story, unfortunately, because I did look at that myself, because we've had a steady improvement or reduction in the outpatient waiting list. I think in November, it might have been October, one of the months, we had 9,000 additional patients added to the waiting list, which were never included in outpatients before, but are now. So I think this is clinical physiology, I think, have been added. So those 9,000 have taken it back up. If you noticed on the outpatient before that, it was heading in the right direction, then it's gone up again. It still, I think, will keep going down because we are doing more outpatients, new and review. So yeah, it's a much bigger number as well, as you can see from the graph. So.
And the number for new consultant outpatient waiting list is just over 160,000, and then it goes up, as you say, in November and December. Those are huge numbers.
They really are.
And is there a plan to deal with that?
There's a lot of different plans. Outpatient modernisation is one of our big key transformation projects. So we have about 4,000 patients already who are on patient-initiated follow-up. So that means instead of being programmed for a review, it's up to the patient. If they have a deterioration, they will contact, and they have a route to contact the clinician directly. So a lot of our reviews are kind of just checking up on patients. So we need to focus more on new to make sure we're seeing new patients and reduce the number of review, which will allow us to do more capacity. There's also, we had a fantastic example today from dermatology about how they're using MyCare and photography to reduce waiting times. So instead of necessarily, I think the waiting time at one stage was like 7 years for a routine dermatology appointment, and they've got that right down, because now you can get access to the clinician quickly, so the GP can get access, they can refer you in, they can get assessment of the photograph, they can get advice and guidance. If you do need to be retained on the waiting list, you will see someone, and if you don't need to be retained, you can be discharged. So there's a lot of work we can do. I think a lot of it will be moving away from traditional models, which is going to take time. But yeah, the outpatients it's probably our biggest challenge.
Okay,
and will there be a specific review of women's health waiting lists?
So we need to move on to other members, just to be fair.
I think that's also very important.
Thanks very much, Chair. Jennifer, this will probably go one of two ways for you, okay? So here's the way it's going. Because I'm going to say, I think, well done. The amount of complaints that I used to get about the Belfast Trust has reduced from you've taken over. I think that there is a sense that people are taking a step back and letting the new leadership bed in, and if people can see that there is change and that there's new systems in place and they feel that they can engage with that and that it's fair and that it's open and it's transparent, that will hopefully help people. I say two ways. Yeah. I could have an inbox tonight that says no, it's actually like this, that or the other. So hopefully it'll go in the right way. And some of the things that you've spoken about are about the changes to the culture that you're making at the top. But one of the concerns that I had right along, and I know I've interacted with you about this, is how the person at the bottom that maybe feels that they're being given a hard time, they're being treated badly, it's how they interact with the process where they feel it's just stacked against them. Has there been any changes in the process that people would engage in that maybe would give them a sense that, right, we're getting a fair chance here, a fair crack at the whip if things go wrong in their workplace or in their working environment?
So there's been quite a bit of focus in relation to this. First of all, we would always want people to be able to raise something with their line manager. If they have a concern about that, they need to have somewhere else to go. I think part of what we need to do is actually equip our managers to deal well with issues of concern. And it's one of the things that we have introduced a new leadership academy, but it's not just about leadership, it's about good old-fashioned management as well. Some of the things that managers are having to deal with now are really genuinely very, very tough, and we need to support managers to be able to do that. So if the line manager is deemed as being the problem, where does the person go? So they go to the person above that. If they're not comfortable doing that, we have our whistleblowing process. And I certainly have seen an increase in the number of people wanting to come forward in relation to whistleblowing. And some of that is just actually about supporting that individual and supporting the manager. Sometimes it's through mediation to come to a different solution. We have appointed a non-executive director as the oversight of that process, so that if a staff member feels that they don't want to come anywhere near the executive team, the non-executive director can have oversight of all of that. So I wouldn't say that we're there yet. It is all part of the cultural change, but it's something that we have a lot of focus on and encouraging people in that direction.
And that's positive to hear, because often the word was nepotism was used, as they felt that if a manager wasn't able to help them and they bypassed that it was a manager's buddy, or former colleague, or former friend, or former whatever, because it is a small place in Belfast, and although it's a big workforce, but the confidence that people can say, well, if I don't, in that immediate space around me, have faith, I can come right out and go somewhere else. If people can have faith in that system, that will hopefully help the bed in, and people will be happy in that. Just to hark back to the issue about the cardiac surgery, where a lot of this started from, are you confident that everybody has undertaken their training? Are there any blocks in there? Or do you feel that department, 100% that department is running well and doesn't have the same issues as it previously had?
I think this is constant gardening, to be quite honest. These are individuals who are working in a high pressure environment, given the nature of the service that they provide. Would I say that everybody in the team is absolutely 100% happy all of the time? No. And I would be reluctant to say any more than that, in case some of you get a text or a phone call to tell you otherwise. It's a team that we continue to wrap around and support, and I think we're going to have to continue to do that for a period of time. But I would want to absolutely assure you of the safety and the quality of the service, and I have no doubt about the commitment of individuals to make that service the best that it can be.
Don't mention gardening, you won't see my garden, the state of it, it brings bad memories for me. Just finally then, we did reference earlier about with the department about care home places that can be used as step down, and that's something that you maybe have some finance available to be able to use, and that maybe that's something that you've had to cut back on. That what we were mentioning earlier, is that something that you would recognise? Does it come to a point where you go, we just don't have the money to be able to pay for these care home places in the independent sector, and therefore people have to stay in beds and it causes the backup? Or do you feel that you're constantly able to use all of the beds that are available to you in the independent sector?
So I didn't recognise that, I'll be quite honest, and I would be happy to engage with the independent sector. I don't know whether it was a particular care home group or in a particular geographical area. It's not something that I recognise. I don't have Colin McMullen, who's the director of our community services here. It may be that as the needs of patients change, maybe it is that we're requiring more dementia beds, for example, in a particular area. Certainly one of the things that we've suggested to RQIA is, can they work with care home providers, because I think we need a shift from the traditional residential beds to more nursing beds, and particularly more nursing beds for people with a challenging behaviour or very complex needs. So unless it's something in that space, but it wasn't something I recognised.
Okay, that's great. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Colin. Nola?
Thank you for your answers so far. I feel like you have kind of done your homework from the questions that I want to ask, and brought social care and women's issues here today. So I am going to be basing most of my questions around that and cancer services, which I presume you would be able to answer anyway. And first of all, I'll start with the last and ask if you can provide an update on the much needed upgrades to the regional haematology unit at the City Hospital. We know that this issue's been raised time again. My colleague Saoirse Eastwood has asked me to raise this again today with you, and I know that there has been some amount of work, like limited work done in the actual tower block, but it needs an overall refurbishment, so I wonder if we could get an update on that today.
I don't have an update on where it is. I know the business case has been approved and the work is ready to go, but I'll need to come back to you with exactly what stage it is at and what the timescales are for completing.
And business case approved, what does that mean for, for patients who, and their families who need to use the haematology ward, what does that actually mean for them?
It's a really big step for us. So basically the work couldn't progress until the business case is approved. The team are ready to go as soon as the work is complete. So everything is really lined up. We just needed to get the go-ahead to proceed. So when we can, we just need to get the solid timescales for it.
So that's about the funding is available to allow us to go ahead, and we as Trust Board have approved that. So it's getting that scheduled in now, along with all of the other work that we would be doing. So that's outside of the very large-scale projects. This is what we would
That
deem
was
as
my next
general
question.
capital.
So it's not going to be, we're not talking years and years.
No.
What kind of time frame are we talking?
Completely different teams that would be doing the very large-scale investment. I don't think that should be terribly long before we get that started. I know we were doing other work in the City Hospital Tower on another floor. So I'll come back to you with a specific date, but my understanding is it's scheduled in not too far away.
I'll look forward to that response. My next question is around the Da Vinci machine in the Belfast Trust and how that can help with gynae waiting lists. I know that the Royal College of Obstetrics and Gynecology had said, in their latest press release that the queue of women stood shoulder to shoulder, 15 miles, I believe it was, for waits for gynae. I've asked the question about robotic assisted surgery many times, working with clinicians and consultants who are trained. It is primarily predominantly used for men's health rather than women's health. And that might not be a conscious decision, but it is a decision nonetheless, where it is benefiting men rather than women whenever those clinicians were trained. We have had a recent answer to a question from the Minister who said that the new robotic surgery that could be used and utilised for gynae across the region has actually just been now thrown in to a review of general surgery, which kind of made me think, is that a step back from where we were? My understanding was that we were actually going to be able to have not only a new machine for gynae, but actually the current machine utilised further.
So I can give you good news. I can start with that. So we had a bid to our charitable funds for a new actual kit under the capital scheme, and they were happy to approve. But there are revenue consequences to initiating a new robot, which obviously we needed to make sure from a consumables point of view that we were able to support the costs associated with that. So that necessitated a bid on the revenue side to our colleagues in commissioning. They have now since come back and approved that proposal. So that led us to being able to approve a trust board for the charitable fund to be secured, and it has gone ahead and we're at procurement stage. So that will go into the City Hospital, and it will be used not just for gynaecology. It is a joint enterprise across colorectal surgery as well, but I'm pleased to say that the commission sessions for gynaecology have been agreed, and that will commence.
And I know that it's not solely for gynaecology, but I just want to emphasise that the fact that it was predominantly used overwhelmingly for men's health, that we could actually see an overwhelming benefit for women's health, particularly in gynaecology waiting lists. Will we see that?
We absolutely will. And the original robot will remain in situ. We were using it episodically. We had sessions available for gynaecology to maintain the skills. So those gynaecologists that were trained were maintaining their skills in the use of it in the sessions that were available to them. This will now obviously make that a more planned and programmed piece of work. And it will be used for gynaecology cases. And we know with endometriosis that there's a significant benefit. Do you want me to give you an update on our gynaecology waiting position?
Yeah, that was going to be my next question.
It is a good story to tell as well. We've still work to do here. I would acknowledge that from the start. The gynaecology team have undertaken a multidisciplinary approach to outpatient modernisation, so I'll start in their outpatient space. So we started the year with a ministerial target of no one waiting greater than 4 years. And then because of the provider collaborative, we set ourselves a more ambitious target around 3 years. So that is the target that we've been working to. So for our outpatient gynae activity for urgents, we started in April 2025 with a waiting time of 36 months. We have by January got that down to 14 months and are on target to have that down to 12 months by the end of March, which is obviously very pleasing to see. Our routine waits started the year at 40 months and again have achieved an improvement at 34 months by January 2026, and again further improvements planned to get us to a projected picture of 32 months, which brings us into the certainly the longest waiting time, less than the 3 years. More work to be done there, clearly.
Is that waiting times for first appointment?
First appointment.
So then do they go then to a queue again for surgery if people require
so
surgery?
Obviously not everyone converts to needing surgery, so
yeah.
those that do will then join the waiting list, and I can give you an update on our inpatient and day case rates. No, it's absolutely fine. I'm happy to do that. And you're right, more activity in the outpatients can put more pressure then onto the inpatient waiting list, so I'm giving you the position as it stands at the moment. Our regional mesh service, which obviously we deliver on behalf of the region, started the year on 10-month waits at April. That is now down to 2 months, and we are going to maintain that. We're very confident that we will maintain that waiting time. So obviously really pleasing across all of the programmes. There hasn't been one area of focus, and others have then drifted out, which is obviously very good to see. We deliver the gynae-oncology service for the region as well, and we consistently meet the 14, 31 and 62-day target. We're on target and on track for any red flag referrals there. So then to the inpatient and day case, for again general gynaecology, we started the year in April 2025 with 85-month waits. That is now down at 64 for January, and we're projecting 35 months by the end of March. So really a lot of progress being made there. For endometriosis cases, we opened the year with 88-month waits. That is now down to 21 months, and we will sustain that going towards the end of the year. So that's again very, very good progress has been made. For regional mesh, for our ins and days, we started with 72-month waits, and we are at 12 months, and we will be at 6 months by the end of March. So in all of those parameters, we've made gains through the work of the team, just rationalising all of the treatment they've done, vast amounts of clinical validation, but they have also, put extra sessions, and they've been doing extra work. We have used the independent sector for displaced work in the more general gynae, so that we can do the regional work. So we've focused on the work that only Belfast can do and couldn't be displaced. So some of our work has gone to independent sector so that we can do that very much more targeted approach. And just in the space around endometriosis, we have in our outpatients, our urgent waiting times, where we opened the year with 8-month waits. That is down to 0. We have no wait in our urgent endometriosis outpatients. And for our routine cases, we started the year with 11 months, and that is now down to 8 months. So again, some improvements there.
So it's worth saying, in your earlier session, you were asking about the committee in common and what were trusts doing together. So this is one of the areas that we asked for focus on. Paula referred to a provider collaborative. So we have a number of provider collaboratives that sit underneath the committee in common structure, which is the chairs and chief executives. So I think the team has worked incredibly hard on this, and the results speak for themselves.
Absolutely. And just one last, I suppose, comment about menopause services, which is often within general gynaecology an area that does get somewhat lost in the focus trying to deal with the red flag work. We started the year with waiting times of 2 years, and it's now at 3 months.
Okay.
So we're in a much improved position across all of the parameters there. There is still much to be done. I would fully recognise that.
Yeah, I think you must be congratulated on the improvements made. I think no wait no wait is fantastic. For one of those, it is fantastic. For urgent endo care, wasn't it? Yeah.
That was the endometriosis.
Yeah. I think just the 35-month for general, it's still a number of years.
It is.
But so still improvements to be made.
But
Do you think you can sustain these?
Yes, these have been done through absolutely very focused work around, sort of the patient-initiated follow-up. So really having that idea of retaining reviews for those that absolutely need them, and then encouraging and empowering people to come back to us when they need us, and being ready to see them. The other piece that we've seen great traction is the advice with guidance, and that was what Alistair was referring to with dermatology. That's been such a success in this space. It has been as well, and it's well received that actually we are giving earlier support to our GP colleagues to manage lower risk work, and then that has really it has brought the provision of care much earlier in the journey for ladies whenever they need it. So it's been a very encouraging sign. So yes, we wouldn't want to go back is the point, and we're committed to continuing to go forward.
That's great, and hopefully with the new machine as well, we can even drive the waiting lists down. Thank you very much for that. And
just maybe the MyCare app, I don't know if you mentioned, it creates huge new opportunities for us in how we manage outpatients, because it does, the advice and guidance works for primary care and works for people whenever they can get advice quickly, when they need it. So if someone, rather than waiting on a long waiting list, They, if they get a blood test, they can be told what they need to do to follow up, whether it's negative or positive, what needs to be done. So I suppose I'm only mentioning that because in my care it is such a fantastic resource for us and such a tool for transformation. And I'm not sure that many people know about it yet in Northern Ireland. I think there's about an eighth of the population I think are signed up to it so far. So I suppose if we're going to prioritise things that would really transform the MyCare app, and as part of EPIC is part of the solution.
Thank you. I had more questions with regard to social care, but I'll just ask one because I know we are quite late, and I can keep in touch again for another update with yourself, Kerry. But I know that you work with the South Eastern Trust in terms of respite provision and trying to work together in Lindsay House. Disappointed to hear the kind of news around what that would facilitate. And I just want to know if you can provide any feedback in terms of work that you're doing, but also that there's other facilities that are currently not in use in the Belfast Trust. It will probably come down to you've written a written question about Chestnut Grove, for example. Money has gone into it. I'm not sure what for. But has there been any other scope and work for respite provision for Belfast Trust families?
We have done extensive scoping, and I know the co-director is also engaged with the states and looking at properties. Today I was also contacted that there may be other opportunities with the provider that we have. So we are continuing to look at our short break opportunities on an ongoing basis. But we have made some improvements also offering short breaks in alternative ways. So we've set up a fostering short breaks, and within 6 months we have 2 carers already assessed and approved, and they're taking children for respite. We also have 6 foster carers being assessed at the moment. So we have 21 inquiries also that have come through that are going to be going through assessment process. So within 6 months we set up foster and short breaks because not all short breaks have to be in a home. We also have set up Forest Lodge as a temporary measure, but you'll be aware of that. And that's RQIA has extended that registration to help. We've also went back to Bernardo's that we have in place. They've had challenges with recruiting staff. So we have looked at those families that are receiving short breaks, respite, and we have extended for other families to come in as well. So more children and families are getting respite. We also have an in-reach service that we have set up that go into families' homes for a few hours a day and also extend over weekends, and that is inundated with referrals. Families are really benefiting from it because they're getting time to go shopping or going for a meal and do a restaurant and what have you. So we are disappointed. We understand Seth's position. They've been very challenged by the situation with Lindsay House, and that's led to challenges for ourselves. But we are exhausting all opportunities at great pace. We have had obstacles trying to find suitable buildings for short breaks, but we haven't stopped looking. So I just want to give you that reassurance. And I think the extension also with our community and voluntary sector, extending our contracts, has really helped. So for example, our children that were on the edge of care, previously we had 13 children on the edge of care waiting for residential care, and that is reduced to 5 at the moment because of the others of increasing short breaks and also providing in-reach and the extension of the community and voluntary input into your families as well. Those families that were waiting for short breaks were from 46, and that's reduced down to 38 as well recently. So we can see improvements. It's not at the speed that we would like because of the challenges that we have faced. But we are, determined to keep driving forward to provide more short breaks.
Okay, I'm happy to take further questions.
Okay, it's 5:15, so are you happy to stay on for another 15 minutes? I nearly asked that question. There's 3 members left. Literally 5 minutes per member. Apologise. We'll have to resurrect
Mine
this
won't
again
even take 5 minutes.
next week. So apologise if you're happy enough.
Yeah.
So, Danny, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair.
You don't have to use them.
Nobody at home to make any tea.
I had quite a few questions and quite a few topics have been picked up already by other people. The one I just wanted to ask you, just to follow on from what Colin was saying about what the independent sector had told us in our briefing last week, that they think there has been an underspend by trusts in certain months of the year, particularly the later months of the year, on social care. Now, you've said you don't recognise that at all. Would you be able to provide us with any figures or anything that could back that up? Because it's quite a strong claim.
We'll come back to you, and anything that you can give us in terms of where they believe the areas of concern are. But I'm happy to go back to the Director, Colin McMullen, to look into this in some detail.
Okay. No problem, thank you. The other thing I was going to ask you was about the DTAs. I see you've provided a graphic for us for 79 days from the 1st of January to the 20th of March last year. I'm just interested why that's shot.
I'm afraid I didn't have an updated graph to hand. The trajectory has been sustained. We saw an increase again, but in November and December, but not to the same levels as the previous November and December. So while it was very busy, and we would have expected the busyness to lead to an increase in DTAs, we have continued this gradual downward trajectory. So we are making progress.
No problem. I'd be interested in seeing some more figures around that.
I can absolutely send an updated graph if that would be helpful, just to show the last few months.
It just seemed a little odd to get a small snapshot, showing it going down. What are you doing to decrease DTAs? Because my understanding is within the population, a certain number of them will get certain illnesses and require hospital treatment at a certain time. How is that being?
So I think so. We did a survey actually of the ED last year, and I think what it showed was there's a large proportion of people come to the emergency department because they don't know or don't have alternatives. So they think that and they're probably right, the ED is the fastest way to get treatment in certain circumstances. So what we've put in place, so this is 2F, is the ward in the Royal. So it's like an acute medical unit, so people can come in, they can get a very quick assessment, and if they're able to go home, with a plan, they can go home with a plan, which means they don't have to stay in hospital, obviously, which is better for them, and avoids any lengthy stay in hospital or lengthier stay in ED. They also have a REACT model, and I'm afraid I can't remember what the REACT acronym stands for. It's a very clever acronym, but it's, so that has a team, a multidisciplinary team, who again, they identify people who come through the front door, they see them quickly, and if there's a way they can direct them into a different service, or make sure they get seen to in a way that they won't have to spend time in the emergency department, they can get diverted into those streams. In addition to that, we also do have a big range of same-day emergency care pathways. So these are pathways where, if someone comes in, they can get an appointment maybe the next day or maybe in 2 days' time into an urgent or rapid clinic, which again means they don't have to wait. They don't have to be admitted and they don't have to wait. So there's cohorts of patients this works for. I think in future we can look at areas that are really exciting, like virtual wards, where people can be monitored either using devices at home or monitored by a group in the hospital. So people who we would currently admit almost as a precaution could be monitored at home safely. So there's the model they've got is working phenomenally well. Our number of DTAs literally dropped overnight when we brought in 2F. It's worked really well and it has been sustained. There is still a lot more to do.
Okay, no, glad to hear that. The other thing I was going to pick up on was just the length of stays. You've highlighted a couple of differences between yourselves and other trusts there. Geriatric medicine in particular is quite significantly different from Northern Trust.
Yes, so that I think the data there is actually how long it takes us to repatriate, usually depending on the location that the patient comes from. So, and I have to say, by the way, up front, this is not targeted at Western or Northern, because they have exactly the same problems when they repatriate patients to us. Because we have a lot of patients we have to repatriate, it becomes more obvious. But so essentially, if someone comes in from Belfast and is repatriated to a Belfast care home or a Belfast home, they tend to be faster. It's whenever we have to move across trust boundaries, there's just an unavoidable delay. Now we do work very closely with the other trusts as well, and with Northern Trust, for example, we have a daily meeting about fractures patients to make sure that we can repatriate as quickly as possible. But it is a constant challenge.
The difference with the Northern one is 10 days.
Yeah, I mean,
So
it,
they
it
say-
could be,
yeah?
with all of these, it could be that particularly long waiters drag the length of time up. Sometimes it might actually be better to look at a median figure, for these sometimes, just to actually see what's the average. Because if you have a patient, and we would get patients who stay for a long time in some of the regional specialties, so it could, if someone's staying for months, say, in hospital for appropriately, it could just be, it could just warp the figure slightly.
Yeah, and I suppose with my previous hat on from the Northern Trust perspective, I mean, this was an incredible problem in terms of trying to repatriate people from Belfast back into Northern Trust. If you look at the service there, particularly in Antrim, very high DTAs, it really doesn't have the infrastructure that it needs to deal with the size of the population, and the same in terms of getting complex people out into a care home package or to home care. So I have a lot of sympathy, I have to say, in terms of the challenges there. But I think the point around maybe a median position might be better.
Okay.
Yeah.
No problem. Thank you.
Thanks, Dominic. Belinda?
Thank you. My first question is just to ask you for something in writing, if you can give it to me, Paula. It's just a breakdown of what, in terms of your report around the Guinea services, what is regional and what is Belfast Trust specific, so that I can start looking at the other trusts around women's health, just and where they're at.
The only true regional specialty is our gynae oncology.
Okay. So nothing in terms of endo. What about the use of the new machine, for example? Is that going to be regional?
So I suppose I should say to you that endometriosis hasn't been a specifically funded and commissioned subspecialty service. We all run it through our general gynaecology services, and we have been perhaps fortunate in some of our more recent appointments. We've had subspecialty teams, and we have actually dedicated them to our endometriosis patients, which is why we are in an improved position. Whether the wherewithal is within other trusts to do that in terms of subspecialty, I wouldn't really be able to comment. But what I would say to you is that the SPPG's intention is to try and bring a more regional approach around endometriosis, and it is our understanding that they'll probably go for a 2-trust model on that. Belfast likely to be one because of the Da Vinci robot and the expectation, and the Western is the other area. So that is our working understanding at this moment, but it is a work in progress still with our colleagues in commissioning.
Okay, well maybe that's a question to ask of that. That's good to even have that information for that reason. That's a question for the Minister. And just in relation to children's services then, because unfortunately they are absolutely, we talk about Cinderella services all the time. There's nothing that is like the Cinderella service that is offered to our children in care settings. And I think that there needs to be a focus. They never have anybody to speak up for them because their families don't have the capacity. So just in terms of the data from Youth Justice Agency has identified that children in residential children's homes represent the majority of statutory referrals for care experienced children. 80% of them. So it says here that there's a subgroup that is in early stages of taking forward a specific project to consider practical actions to have to reduce that. Can you give us any detail on that? And if you can't, I am happy to get that in writing. And is the stuff that you talked about earlier around the specific programme around working with children who maybe are aggressive in care homes and the trauma-informed approach to that, is that part of that?
No, they're separate models, but I'm happy to give you information on both. I don't have the specifics to give you, so I don't want
I'm happy to get it in writing.
Okay,
I'm happy to get it in writing, but just if I can get as much detail as possible. And even if we can get a wee bit of detail around how they're coming into contact with Youth Justice. So is it around aggression within the residential settings? Because my understanding was that there was some really good work happening there.
Absolutely.
Because this is their home.
Yeah,
at the end
it
of the
is.
day.
And we see it as a therapeutic home, and that's why the Northern Ireland therapeutic model that we've all embraced in our residential homes has helped de-escalate that and change mindsets as well.
Yeah.
And that this is a behaviour response. It's not an assault on a member of staff. It's just how your feelings and your trauma acts out. So we have done a lot of work around that, and we have really reduced incidents, as I said earlier, but also the homes are actually better calibrated. There's a better feel, there's better interpersonal relationships as well. So I'll certainly send you into the FTSE model and even our statistics as well about how we have improved. And I'll look into the matters in relation to the Youth Justice Group that is to be set up. and come back to you.
That'll be really good, and we can go back to that
Okay.
then another time. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Alan? Thank you, Chair. Just one very quick comment and one very quick question to you, Jennifer. First of all, Paul, well done. You'll be expected to come here every week to tell us the good news.
No
the bad news
pressure.
that we have to deal with every week. Jennifer, just on the maternity hospital, the last briefing that we got back in October, and I appreciate you're not really here to comment on the complexities of the maternity hospital, but we were told at the last briefing that the Trust and the legal representatives were working with independent experts on issue of liability. Has there been any update on liability?
So-
We're all keen to know.
And as soon as I'm able to give you a clear briefing on that, I'm happy to bring it here. So we don't have the final information in relation to that.
Still not. Okay.
Still not.
Still not.
Okay,
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much. Just, Paula, very quickly, and I don't want to prolong this, but like everybody has said, congratulations on those figures. Some of those are very dramatic. Just in terms of the endometriosis, and this, you're saying the waiting list has reduced to 0. So is that 0 for treatment, the waiting list for
So
treatment, or
that's
0 for
outpatient referrals, and it was for the urgent category, so the routine category has still got a lengthy wait attached to it at this time. But obviously what we've tried to do is to pull it out from the general gynecology wait, so that at least we're putting a more focused approach, which is why I think we've managed to successfully bring our urgent waiting time down, rather than everyone just waiting globally for it.
So, I mean, we obviously had a debate in the Assembly in relation to this subject, so that's why I'm interested to know, in terms of the numbers of urgents that have been reduced to 0, how many are we talking about?
I don't have that written down in front of me, but I'm happy to provide that to you to get the actual numbers that were in the category. Absolutely, we'll
I think that would be
provide
helpful, because
Sure.
I mean it's definitely an issue of concern.
Yes, well, absolutely, no problem at all.
Okay, thank you. So thank you very much, all of you. I appreciate you staying longer. I was told in that session that there was a music class going to be starting, so I thought we were going to be drowned out on it, so that
Finish
didn't
your
happen.
join in.
But I appreciate you spending the length of time that you did with us. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thanks very much.
So, members, I'm going to leave correspondence to next week, but in terms of item number 9, the written briefing from the Department on the Justice Bill, Part 2, the written briefing is on page 81 of the main pack. If members have any comments that they want to make? No? Okay. Content. In terms of item number 8, the written briefing from the Department, Violence and Aggressions towards Staff. So we've received the written briefing, it's page 78. We did seek lots of further information on the issue in the last 2 weeks, including a breakdown of where incidents are taking place and information on the prosecutions. So was that supposed to come with this, or is that so that's, I mean, that briefing's 1 page, it's not really telling us much, but we have requested additional information, so hopefully we'll get that soon. So still, if any members have any other comments to make in relation to that? None? Okay, we'll wait till we get them all. So, I say that leaves correspondence, going to leave that to next week. Any other business? None. Okay, the forward work programmes at page 356, if anybody has any comments? None. Okay, time, date and place of next meeting. Next formal committee meeting is going to be room 29, Thursday the 12th of February at 2 p.m. Meeting adjourned.